Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a story soaked in silk, blood and scandal where pillow talk could topple an empire, and a single glance across a crowded hall changes everything. This is not a love story the poets would have dared to write down, mostly because the people in it were terrifying, powerful and definitely not the types you wanted to cross. But you're going right into the centre of it today, where a secret romance brews between two of the most dangerously influential people in the ancient world. And yeah, spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps more than you think. Drop your city and what time it is in the comments. I always love seeing where and when you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It starts with a feast. You're standing at the edge of a marble colonnade, breath held in by a tight silk tunic, wine in one hand, trying not to sweat through your gold-embroidered sandals. The scent of roasted figs, honey-glazed boar, and oil lamps fills the air. This is the imperial banquet, Rome's version of a VIP after-party, and you're barely high-ranking enough to be invited. Every corner of the hall is dripping in wealth. Bronze statues glint with candlelight, harpists strum, delicate notes as peacocks strut between guests, and everywhere people are whispering. You notice her immediately. She's seated high on the dais, surrounded by senators and military officers, but clearly apart from them, tall, draped in deep crimson. Her hair is arranged in a tower of braids held together with tiny golden pins shaped like serpents. Her eyes are unreadable, but you feel them slice through the crowd until they land on someone else, the man just stepping into the hall. He's not dressed for court. His armour is dusted with the sand of some distant province. The scroll tucked under his arm suggests he's just come from delivering news. Military reports, probably. He's sun-darkened, scarred and doesn't bow low enough when announced. But the Empress doesn't mind. She watches him with the calm intensity of someone selecting the next move on a board game only she understands. And you, for better or worse, are standing close enough to hear her quiet command, "Bring him wine." This, historians agree, is probably where it all began. The woman was no ordinary royal, let's call her Lucilla, based loosely on the historical figure, daughter of Marcus Aurelius, widow of the co-emperor Lucius Verus, and a known political schemer. The man, we'll call him Aelius, a fictional stand-in for the many generals whose careers exploded and sometimes ended under mysterious circumstances. Lucilla had status, money, and a son with imperial blood. Aelius had popularity with the troops and the kind of fame you earn by winning impossible battles in Gaul. They were both useful, they were both dangerous, and very quickly they were both something else. Fascinated. The first thing they shared wasn't a kiss or a whispered confession, it was silence. Not awkward silence, but the kind that buzzes with too much being unsaid. They sat near each other that night, sipping wine with matching smirks while other people talked too loudly around them. She asked about war. He made a joke about politics, neither laughed, but both understood the punchline. Here's the historical fact for tonight. After Lucius Verus died, Lucilla's political future dimmed. She was demoted from co-empress to imperial relative, a massive social drop. But she wasn't the kind to fade into the background. Her presence at state events like this banquet wasn't protocol, it was strategy. She wanted to be seen, she wanted to be remembered. And maybe, just maybe, she wanted revenge. Now, the fringe fact? According to a half-preserved satirical play from the time, yes, the Romans had political satire, a certain unnamed woman in the imperial family was rumoured to charm generals with coded brooches. 1 pin meant, "I want to meet." 2 pins meant danger. 3 pins? Tonight. No, we don't have proof this was Lucilla, but wouldn't it be fun if it was? And here's where historians start debating. Some say Lucilla's interest in Aelius was purely strategic. Marrying him would give her a direct military foothold and maybe even a shot at reclaiming the throne. Others argued it was personal, a woman sick of being a pawn finally choosing her own knight. And some, the more romantic sort, whispered that she really did fall for him, heart first, crown second. But let's be real, it's Rome, nothing's ever that simple. Back at the feast, a musician plucks the final chord of a love song. A tray of olives crashes to the floor, a drunk senator is laughing too loudly at his own joke about foreign provinces, and in the middle of it all, Lucilla stands and dismisses the party with a single lifted hand. People bow, scrape, and exit like waves rolling back from the shore, except Aelius. He stays. A servant beckons him forward. You watch as he follows, boots clicking on the mosaic floor, head unbowed. He disappears behind a curtain of beaded gold thread. No one speaks of it openly, but later you'll hear someone mutter the word consort. Of course, Rome has rules about this. An imperial woman, even a widow, can't just pair off with a war hero, especially not one whose loyalty might still lie more with the army than the throne. But if anyone can bend rules until they scream, it's Lucilla. And tonight, with the palace hushed and torchlight flickering along the marble corridors, you get the creeping feeling that something just shifted under your feet. Whatever they say behind those golden curtains, you'll never know, but it's not innocent. It's never innocent in Rome. You wake to the sound of bells in the forum, temple bells, sharp and metallic, ringing out over the rooftops like a warning. Something happened last night. You can feel it in the air. That brittle kind of stillness that falls over Rome right before things go very wrong. The pigeons are uneasy. The guards at the palace gates are whispering instead of shouting, and the statues of the gods, smeared with fresh sacrificial blood, seem to be watching everything a little more closely than usual. Word spread slowly at first, like honey poured over cold marble. The general was summoned. The emperor spoke to him privately. They were seen walking in the palace gardens at dawn. She in a dark cloak, he in armour still dusted with ash. That's not normal. That's not protocol. By mid-morning the rumours are climbing up every staircase in the city. Lucilla's not just grieving anymore, she's hunting. You see, Lucilla was no stranger to power. She'd been married off young, sent to co-rule from the east with her first husband, Lucius Verus. That sounds glamorous until you realise that every move she made was dictated by her father, the philosopher-emperor, Marcus Aurelius. Even her title had been borrowed. When Verus died, likely from plague, though more cynical voices muttered poison, Lucilla was shuffled off the main stage and expected to quietly retire to motherhood and religious ceremonies. She didn't. She waited. Now she was the most eligible widow in the empire, and everyone knew it. You pass through the marketplace later that day and hear her name everywhere. Young scribes mutter about her beauty. Older merchants nod grimly and say she has her mother's cunning. One armour polisher swears that Lucilla visited the barracks in disguise once just to see how the soldiers lived. There's something magnetic about her, something people feel compelled to exaggerate, which is exactly how she likes it. Aelius, meanwhile, is suddenly everywhere. He's appointed to oversee a strategic military supply line running from Gaul to northern Italia, a position usually held by bureaucrats, not field commanders. He's granted a villa just outside the city, complete with servants, private stables, and its own temple to Mars. The Senate raises eyebrows, but no one objects publicly. After all, he's earned it. He's saved Rome's borders more than once. If he wants to live a little closer to the centre of power, who's going to say no? You watch the chessboard reset in real time. He moves into her orbit like a planet pulled too close to the sun. They begin to appear at the same banquets, never touching but always within a few feet of each other. She finds reasons to mention him in the speeches, his courage, his loyalty, his patriotism. He responds with actions, quelling uprisings, personally delivering tribute, escorting senators across dangerous roads like some kind of armoured bodyguard with a political edge. And it's working, for now. Tonight, there's another gathering at the palace. You're not invited, but that doesn't stop you from hanging around the shadows near the kitchens, eavesdropping on servants and drinking watered-down wine that no one will miss. The main gossip tonight is a dream, a prophetic one. Someone claims a priestess at the Temple of Vesta saw Lucilla in a vision, crowned in gold and standing over a crumbling statue of the emperor. That might sound like nonsense, but in Rome, dreams have weight. Dreams can kill. Here's tonight's historical fact. Roman women of the noble birth weren't supposed to hold power, but that didn't stop them. Behind nearly every emperor, there was a mother, sister, or wife pulling strings like a spider in silk. Lucilla was descended from a long line of those women. Domitia, Agrippina, Livia, all of them remembered for the men they manipulated or destroyed. She knew her history and she was rewriting it. Fringe fact, there was a festival that year. One of those half-pagan, half-imperial holidays where people wore masks and role-played as gods. According to one surviving letter, Lucilla and Aelius were seen dressed as Venus and Mars, lovers, divine opposites. The person who wrote the letter, a court scribe named Quintus, burned the original but kept a copy buried under a mosaic floor. It wasn't discovered until centuries later. Is it true? Maybe. Is it juicy? Absolutely. Now for the debate. Scholars can't agree on when exactly Lucilla and Aelius crossed the line from flirtation to affair. Some say it was immediate, that first night behind the curtain. Others argue it simmered for months, a slow build of tension and shared ambition. A third theory, more recent and increasingly popular, suggests they never consummated anything at all, that it was all political theatre designed to rally support without risking scandal. But that doesn't explain the letters, or the locked doors, or the silk belt found in Aelius's villa, embroidered with Lucilla's personal motto. Back in your corner of the palace, you're trying to look like you belong while very much not belonging. You pass a room lit only by a single oil lamp. Through the gap in the curtains, you see Aelius seated on a marble bench, Lucilla beside him, both of them leaning in so closely you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. She's not smiling. Neither is he. Whatever's happening between them, it's serious. It's dangerous. It's not love, not entirely. Suddenly the lamp is snuffed out. You backs away, heartbeat in your throat. You know better than to stay close to stories like this. They have a habit of turning bloody. But as you leave, you hear one more thing, a servant whispering in the hall, warning someone else to stay quiet. The words are soft, but they chill you. They think no one knows, but Rome always knows. You're beginning to notice a pattern. Every time Lucilla appears in public, Aelius isn't far behind. Sometimes he's standing with the praetorians, sometimes seated behind a senator, sometimes mounted on horseback during a triumph, but always there, always watching her. You don't know if anyone else sees it the way you do. Maybe they're all pretending not to, or maybe they're just terrified of what it means. Because here's the thing, Aelius is not just some sword-swinging gladiator with a square jaw. He's smart. Too smart. The kind of smart that gets you promoted fast or executed faster. He knows how to read a battlefield, yes, but he also knows how to read a room, especially one full of paranoid senators and thin-skinned emperors. He doesn't speak often, but when he does, people listen. And lately he's been speaking more. You're at the edge of a military ceremony now, one of those rigid, hyper-formal affairs where bronze clinks against marble, and everyone pretends they aren't freezing in their polished sandals. The Emperor, Commodus, is present. He's in one of his better moods today, which still isn't great. His hair's been curled unnaturally tight, and he keeps glancing at the sword strapped to his waist like he wants someone to try something. No one does. Lucilla is beside him, still technically a member of the imperial household, though she always keeps a few feet of air between them, like even being too close might contaminate her. Aelius is stationed across from them. He receives a commendation today for military excellence. Everyone claps. Commodus forces a smile. And then it happens. Lucilla claps too, just once, sharp and deliberate. And in that moment you catch something strange, the smallest nod from Aelius. Almost nothing. A blink, a twitch, but you feel it ripple through the gathering like a dagger hidden in a bouquet. You realise they're not just watching each other. They're communicating, publicly, boldly, like they think no one will dare stop them. That night Rome begins to whisper louder. People start to ask questions. Why hasn't Lucilla remarried? Why is Aelius suddenly in control of 3 separate legions? Why is there talk of moving troops toward the capital, when the threats are supposed to be on the frontier? These aren't the questions of casual curiosity. These are the kinds of questions that get you stabbed in the back of a bathhouse. So naturally, you listen to every single one. Here's your historical fact for the evening. Lucilla did, in fact, remarry after her first husband died, but not to Aelius. She was paired off to a senator named Pompeianus, a safe, dull man from the provinces. It was meant to stabilise her status without giving her too much power. He was older, respectable and, crucially, unambitious. But their marriage, according to most records, was more legal than emotional. Some claim they barely lived in the same house. Others say he conveniently travelled whenever things in Rome got tense. Your fringe fact? Some temple records, scribbled in the margins of weathered calendars, mention unusual donations made in Lucilla's name. Not coins or jewels, but strange offerings, a single soldier's sandal, a broken sword, a wax figure of a wolf wrapped in red string. These aren't standard gifts, they're charms, and they point to something older than Roman religion, something buried, whispered, Not illegal, but frowned upon, especially when they start working. The scholarly debate here is fascinating. Some historians argue Lucilla was actively attempting to stage a coup with Aelius's help, that she was laying groundwork, alliances, appointments, propaganda. Others claim it wasn't that direct, that she was simply leveraging romance to gather influence, and Aelius was doing the same. And then there's the third, slightly more romantic view, that they were simply two powerful people drawn together by something beyond politics, and that everything else, the rebellion, the rumours, the near collapse, was just a byproduct of their undeniable chemistry. Sounds dramatic, sure, but this is Rome. If it's not dramatic, it's probably not real. Back in your corner of the world, you notice other people getting nervous. The palace staff starts changing shifts more often, as if not wanting to be associated too closely with any one side. Guards at the gates begin checking names more carefully. Messengers come and go constantly, some with military crests on their tunics, others dressed like ordinary merchants but carrying seals marked with the imperial eagle. You know enough to keep your head down. One day, while delivering scrolls to the archives, you're nearly trampled by Aelius himself. He sweeps past in a rush, boots echoing down the corridor, face unreadable. He's carrying something, a folded piece of parchment stained and fancined with something dark. You think it's wine until you catch the smell. It's not wine. You duck into a side hallway and press your back against the cool stone wall. A moment later, Lucilla follows. She doesn't run, she glides, calm, composed. Like this is all part of the plan. She sees you, nods once, and continues without a word. You don't breathe again until the echo of her sandals disappears. You don't know what was on that parchment, but you know it mattered, and you know something just accelerated. There's one more banquet that week, smaller, quieter, with no official announcements, the kind where only the inner circle gets invited, and everyone else just hears stories the next day. What you hear this time is chilling. Lucilla made a toast. To what Rome might yet become, she said. Vague, right? But the way she said it, that was the threat, the promise, the seduction. And according to two servants who overheard her, she looked directly at Aelius as she said it. Now you're in it. You're watching two of the most dangerous people in the Empire draw closer, step by step, like two flames slowly feeding off each other. This isn't a fling. This is a campaign. And Rome? Rome doesn't know it yet, but it's about to burn. You wake to a whisper, not in your room, not even in your ear, but in the walls. Rome has that effect on you. It breathes when you're not looking. It watches when you're asleep. And lately, it's been whispering about things that should never be said out loud. Things like betrayal, sedition, love. The servants are quieter now. They speak in glances and gestures, like words are too dangerous to use. You hear phrases like the red room or midnight rose passed under breath. And you know they don't mean furniture or flowers. They mean meetings, rendezvous, secrets. And every time one of those phrases is uttered, you catch a familiar pair of names sliding behind them like shadows on marble. Lucilla, Aelius. Their affair has slipped out from behind locked doors. It's no longer the concern of only a few gossips and poets. Senators are talking now, generals are watching closely. And the Emperor, well, he may be a man-child with a god complex, but even he knows when someone's trying to play chess behind his back. It's in the air that morning, the feeling that something's tipped. A guard at the barracks stares a little too long when Lucilla's carriage rolls by. The baker who delivers to the palace bows lower than usual, mutters a prayer under his breath. You feel it too, in your chest, like pressure before a storm. Here's how the story spreads, not in declarations or proclamations, but through the folds of silk curtains, the hands of eunuchs carrying scrolls, the glances exchanged in bathhouses. You overhear one conversation between two senators in the garden, just one sentence. If she marries him, Rome falls. That's not melodrama, that's real fear. Because it's not just a scandal. This isn't some bored widow indulging in a dalliance. Lucilla is the daughter of an emperor, the sister of the current one and the mother of a potential future heir. Aelius commands troops that outnumber any guard in the capital. Together, they don't just have influence, they have options, and options, in Rome, are always dangerous. Here's your historical fact tonight. Roman women, even elite ones, were expected to keep to the domus, literally, the house. That meant minimal public roles, no formal political power, and so are terribly no romantic entanglements that threatened state stability. But Lucilla had already broken every rule by surviving past her usefulness. She hadn't retired, she hadn't disappeared, she was still here, still moving pieces, and that, more than anything else, terrified the establishment. Fringe fact, a tabloid scroll, yes, those existed, once circulated an illustration of a woman with a dagger hidden in her sleeve, standing atop a wolf. Beneath it was a phrase, "The she-wolf waits for war." No name was mentioned, but the implication was clear. These weren't just love stories anymore, they were warnings. Scholars today still debate how much of this was orchestrated by Lucilla herself. Was she feeding the rumours to inflate her own mystique, or were things spiralling out of her control? Some believe she encouraged the gossip, knowing full well it would rattle her enemies and make her seem larger than life. Others argue she was caught in a political web she hadn't fully woven. Either way, what was once a private affair had become a very public liability. And the palace? The palace is not a home anymore. It's a stage. Every corridor echoes with the footsteps of someone listening, someone reporting. You move more carefully now, even your breath feels too loud in certain wings. You know someone has seen you near Lucilla's chambers. You know that if things turn ugly, being a witness might be as dangerous as being involved. You see her once that week, in the courtyard at twilight, standing beneath a column carved with old victories. She's alone, or appears to be. You stop, not daring to interrupt, but she turns anyway, eyes catching yours like a net. For a moment, she looks tired. Not defeated, just frayed, like the thread she's been pulling is finally beginning to snap. Then Aelius steps from behind the statue of Mars. They don't touch. Of course they don't. That would be too obvious. But they're close. Close enough that you can hear the silence between them. It's not romantic. It's tactical. They speak softly, their words lost in the wind. But you can tell from the way she folds her arms and he shakes his head. This is not about love anymore. This is planning. Preparation. They're not wondering if they'll be caught. They're deciding what to do when they are. That night, you can't sleep. The palace is too still. Even the birds have stopped chattering in the eaves. You get up, walk the halls like a ghost, and somewhere near the archive wing you see something that freezes your blood. A senator whispering to a palace scribe, slipping him something under a sleeve. A coin, a message you can't tell, but whatever it is, it's not innocent. It never is. By morning, the entire tone of Rome has shifted. The forum is tense. The priests chant a little louder than usual as if trying to smother the rising anxiety. Temple fires burn higher. Someone sacrifices a black bull before noon. That's not standard protocol, that's panic. Then the rumours arrive, crisp and fast like storm winds. There's been a break-in at a military archive. A name was erased from the rolls. Some say it was Aelius's, some say it was Lucilla's. A few claim it was both. Another whisper. A slave caught carrying a love letter written in a woman's hand, seized and executed before anyone could read the full message. Half a stanza, supposedly, was preserved. Should they drag me through the streets, let it be with my hand in yours. You don't even know if it's real, but gods, it sounds real. Now even Commodus is starting to notice. You see it in the tightened security around his chambers, the way he glares at everyone a second longer than necessary. He's paranoid on a good day. Now, with rumours of betrayal and palace whispers dripping like acid through the marble cracks, he's one step away from violence. You hear it again that night. The Red Room. This time from a guard, the phrase passes between hands like a dagger. Whatever's coming, whatever Lucilla and Aelius are planning, it's moving faster than anyone expected. And you're stuck in the middle, watching a love that should have been hidden grow teeth. You find yourself counting footsteps now, not your own. Those are muffled by the palace carpets and the practiced shuffle of someone who's seen too much and said too little. No, these are heavier, sharper. The boots of soldiers who have begun patrolling the halls with a little more purpose than usual, a little less pretense. Before they wandered in ceremonial spirals, all shine and parade. Now they clomp. They grip their spears tighter. They scan the shadows like something might jump out. Something might. Rome has always been paranoid, but lately it feels like the whole city's holding its breath. And at the centre of it all, a woman who's no longer pretending not to be dangerous, and a man who's learned that lust and power make a pretty addictive cocktail. You see it in Aelius's eyes when he walks through the forum square in full armour, nodding to old senators with that smile that isn't quite a smile. You see it in Lucilla's posture when she rides through the palace gates, her chin high, her cloak snapping like the wing of a vulture. She isn't afraid anymore, which is terrifying. You hear the latest from a kitchen boy, red-faced and wide-eyed, who claims to have overheard a conversation between two scribes. The Senate has called an emergency session. No official topic announced. That never means anything good. One of the scribes allegedly dropped a phrase that echoes in your skull for days. The crown is slipping, and you know who they think is trying to catch it. You're summoned, not formally, not in writing, but with a subtle wave from a steward you recognise as one of Lucilla's. You follow. You shouldn't, but you do. Through the servants' corridors, down a back stairwell that smells of damp limestone and old blood, into a chamber that isn't on any map. It's warm, lit by oil lamps, tiled with red and black mosaics that form no clear pattern. And there she is, Lucilla. Draped in a blue robe this time, hair down, barefoot. You realise this isn't a seduction. It's strategy. She wants to appear honest, intimate, human. But she's never just one thing, is she? Tell me, she says, what are they whispering about today? You're not sure if she's asking rhetorically, but she's watching you so closely you answer anyway. You, him, the Emperor. She doesn't blink. In that order? You nod. She smiles. Good. Then she waves you off as though that single moment of human contact has served its purpose. You're not angry, you're relieved. Because for all her menace, there's something honest about her ruthlessness. She doesn't pretend not to be dangerous. That makes her more trustworthy than half the men in the Senate. Here's your historical fact for tonight. The Roman Senate had limited actual power during the reign of Commodus, but it still held immense symbolic authority. Any plot, especially one that involved changing the succession or challenging imperial blood, required senatorial support or at least senatorial silence. Lucilla, being a former empress and daughter of Marcus Aurelius, still had allies in that room, for now. Your fringe fact? There's a lesser-known Roman tradition involving birds, yes, birds. The augurs would read omens based on the patterns of flight. One particularly persistent story says that, during this time, a flock of crows landed in the forum, one for each letter in the name Lucilla. No proof, of course, but someone carved it into a wall, so naturally the myth stuck. Now for the debate. Was Aelius the mastermind or the pawn? Some scholars insist that Lucilla used him, that he was her sword, nothing more. Others argue the reverse, that Aelius had plans of his own and Lucilla was merely a stepping stone. And then there's the third camp. They were equals, partners, maybe not in love, not in the traditional sense, but bonded in a kind of twisted destiny. Two people who realised they could never have Rome's peace, so they decided to take its chaos. Whatever the truth, things escalate fast. You hear that Aelius has begun moving troops, not toward the borders, not toward any known threat, but toward the capital, quietly, strategically, under the pretense of rotation and relief. But it doesn't smell like logistics, it smells like siege preparation, and that's when the public begins to notice. Pamphlets start circulating, not official ones, these are handwritten, passed hand to hand like cursed scrolls. They contain poems, short and crude, suggesting the Empress and the General are more than just allies. One ends with the line, one wears a crown, the other wears nothing. Subtlety was not their strength. The palace scrambles, Commodus orders arrests. A few scribes vanish overnight. You watch as a boy barely older than you is dragged from the archive room, shouting about prophecy and divine unions. You think about helping, you don't, because now you're scared, not of them, not of Lucilla or Aelius, but of the air around them, of the way everything feels like it's leaning forward towards some invisible cliff. No one's breathing properly anymore. Even the marble floors feel like they're vibrating beneath your feet. That night, Lucilla and Aelius appear at a theatre performance together. Officially, they're seated apart, but they arrive at the same time. Their gazes linger too long during the love scenes, and when the play ends, a dull tragedy about loyalty and war, Lucilla rises first, and Aelius follows 3 steps behind. Not side by side, not yet, but close enough to make every tongue in the place wag like a dog in heat. Afterward, a high-ranking priest is said to have approached Lucilla and offered a quiet blessing for unity. Whether it meant political or marital, no one knows, but the Emperor hears about it, and he does not laugh. You don't sleep again that night, not because of fear, because of anticipation, because this isn't just a scandal anymore. It's a storm. And you're standing in the eye. The wine tastes funny tonight, not in the usual way where it's been watered down by a servant trying to stretch the amphora. Or steep too long with rosemary and dates until it tastes like cough syrup? No, this time it's off. Metallic. Sharp. A whisper of something bitter hiding beneath the sweetness. You're not important enough to be poisoned, but the thought still flits across your mind as you watch a goblet tremble slightly in your hand. Because lately, everything's starting to feel poisoned. Not literally, though who knows, but metaphorically. The air in the palace is thick, syrupy, paranoid. The gossip that once tickled the ears now coils around necks. Guards who once leaned on their spears with casual laziness now stand rigid at attention. And behind closed doors, everyone is trying to guess who will make the first move. The lovers or the Empire. You're in the hallway when it happens, a servant, one you vaguely recognise. The freckled one from the West Wing collapses, right there in the corridor, arms trembling, face twisted in agony. His mouth foams, 2 guards shout, someone yells for water, but it's too late. By the time his body stops convulsing, the silence is loud enough to crack marble. The whispers begin instantly. Poison. And not random poison. Targeted. Calculated. The sort of poison that says, I know you know something. Within hours, 4 more servants disappear. 2 from Lucilla's wing, 1 from the records chamber, and 1 who used to brush Aelius's horses. Gone. Not officially, just not there anymore. And so, of course, now everyone suspects Lucilla. Or Aelius, or both. Who else would use poison to clean up loose threads? But here's where things get weirder. The poison is not one Rome typically uses. It's not hemlock or belladonna, or the usual cocktail of the noble toxins. The palace physician mutters about something foreign, perhaps Egyptian, something rare and ceremonial. Too expensive for anyone but someone very high in power to even access. So now the story spreads. Not only are the lovers eliminating witnesses, they're using exotic means. That kind of detail doesn't stay in the shadows for long. By morning, someone's carved a snake into the side of the temple wall. Just 1 line of graffiti below it. Venom in velvet. That's how Rome works. Symbols first, action later. Here's your historical fact for the night. Poison was a real concern in ancient Rome, especially among the elite. The Roman Senate even created a law, the Lex Cornelia de Sicariis et Veneficis, specifically to address assassins and poisoners. But enforcement was uneven, and accusations were often politically motivated. You could kill a dozen people with poison, and as long as they were enemies of the state, no one would blink. But poison someone connected to the imperial family, that's a death sentence. Fringe fact? There were entire books now lost that listed which wines masked which poisons best. A few fragments remain. One suggests that thick, honeyed wine from Carthage was best for disguising metallic aftertastes. Coincidentally, that's the same kind of wine served at last night's banquet. The one where Aelius was unusually quiet and Lucilla smiled too often. Now for the scholarly debate. Who started the killing? Some historians argue it wasn't Lucilla or Aelius at all. They believe it was Commodus's own men stirring the pot to draw out a reaction. After all, paranoia is one of the Emperor's favourite weapons. Others claim Lucilla, ever the strategist, began the quiet purge of anyone who knew too much. And a third theory? It wasn't murder. It was a message, a demonstration. Not to eliminate a threat, but to remind everyone what was at stake if they chose the wrong side. Meanwhile, back in the real world, you can't even look at a cup of wine without second-guessing your future. The courtiers start wearing little charms again. Tiny protective amulets of bone or polished jet, supposedly blessed by the Vestal Virgins. You see one senator quietly rub his between his fingers like a worry stone during a council meeting. You spot a scroll reader pull his from his tunic right before announcing new military appointments, 2 of which go to men loyal to Aelius. The message is clear, the general is rising. And Lucilla, she's hosting private dinners now, no formal invitations, just word passed through trusted mouths. Only the elite are allowed in, military commanders, governors, influential matrons. You don't know what's being said behind those velvet curtains, but when guests leave, their faces are different. Not afraid, focused, like they've been given a role in something massive. You overhear one of them murmur, "We have the better vision." And that's when it hits you. This isn't just about love. Or lust, or power. It's ideology. Lucilla and Aelius, whatever they are to each other, have become something more, a rallying point for the disillusioned. People are tired of Commodus, tired of his games, his vanity, his gladiator fantasies and divine delusions. Rome, once the proud engine of an empire, now serves a man who would rather reenact Hercules' myths than govern. The people are ready for change, and Lucilla? She's offering it. But change in Rome never comes cleanly. One evening, just as the moon peeks over the rooftops, you catch the scent of something unfamiliar on the wind, burning parchment. Not unusual by itself, except it's coming from the sealed archives. That's not where trash is burned. You sneak closer, peek through the iron lattice. Your scrolls, dozens of them, piled high and lit with oil. A figure in dark robes tosses one final scroll onto the flames. The label catches light. Line of succession. You back away before they see you, heart pounding. Whatever Lucilla and Aelius are planning, it's not just seduction or whispers, it's erasure, reinvention, rewriting who rules, and you're now part of a story that someone is trying very hard to destroy. The message arrives folded inside a fig. Not just any fig either. One of those plump, late summer ones, glazed in honey and served on a silver tray during a midday meal you definitely shouldn't be attending. You're refilling wine goblets when you spot it. A scrap of parchment, creased tightly and slick with syrup peeking from the soft purple flesh. No name, no seal, just a single sentence written in a hurried hand. Letters are being opened. You nearly drop the tray, not because you're surprised, but because you already suspected. The whole city has. For weeks now, things have been vanishing mid-transit. Private messages delayed or rerouted, answers that arrive days late, if at all. And then, just last night, a soldier was caught trying to copy an official order behind a bakery. His hands were chopped off at the wrist. His tongue followed. The scrolls aren't safe anymore. Which is ironic, because Lucilla and Aelius started with letters. Their romance, or their rebellion, depending who you ask, was born in ink. At least that's the version whispered by couriers and scribes, and the first letter supposedly came after their second private meeting. Aelius had gone north on campaign. Lucilla had remained in Rome. The note was short, poetic, vaguely threatening, something about 2 swords, 1 cause, and no more waiting. No name signed, just a drawn serpent with twin heads. She was subtle like that. And he? He wrote back. What followed was months of carefully coded correspondence. Not the usual ciphered nonsense either. Actual riddles, historical allusions, mythological references only a fellow elite would catch. She'd reference Helen of Troy, he'd respond with Achilles. One scroll apparently contained a detailed report of a battle, but the first letter of every line spelled out Veniam Nocte. Come at night. Romantic? Maybe, but also risky, because letters leave trails, and in Rome trails get people killed. You hear from a stable boy, whose ears are sharper than any tutor's, that an intercepted message was recently discovered, unsealed, unmistakable. It didn't name names, but it mentioned our shared crown, our cause, and something about restoring balance by breaking it first. Vague enough to deny, specific enough to raise every eyebrow in the Senate. Here's your historical fact. In the late 2nd century, Rome had a thriving spy network. They weren't officially called spies, of course. They were messengers, schlichts, advisors. But everyone knew. Letters were routinely opened and copied, then resealed using wax molds to disguise the intrusion. The imperial post itself was a sieve, leaking secrets in every direction. Fringe fact? Some nobles hired personal letter eaters. Yes, that's exactly what it sounds like. Trusted slaves trained to literally chew and swallow messages if caught. There's even a story, half myth, half report, about one of Lucilla's slaves who died with half a scroll lodged in his throat. The contents were never recovered, though the rumour was it detailed a map of palace escape tunnels. Now the debate. Were Lucilla and Aelius careless or calculated? Some scholars say their letters were deliberate traps, meant to be intercepted, to spread fear or mislead the emperor's inner circle. Others think they were reckless, caught up in their own sense of invincibility. A third group believes the letters weren't romantic at all, but political documents disguised as flirtation. You know, the kind of pillow talk that ends with troop movements and dead senators. You're moving more cautiously now. Every whisper feels like a test, every invitation a trap. Even the pigeons seem to fly more nervously overhead, their shadows darting across the marble like warnings. And then one morning you see him, Aelius, alone, no armour, no retinue, just him standing in the centre of the old temple square, eyes on the horizon. He looks tired. Not in the way soldiers look tired after months of battle. This is deeper. He's pacing something out. A pattern. A distance. You recognize the stance. The way generals study terrain before they move. This isn't a casual stroll. You step behind a pillar and watch. He's holding something, a wax tablet, half wrapped in cloth. He pulls the stylus from his belt, writes, scratches something out, writes again, then tucks the tablet beneath his cloak and leaves. You wait until he's gone. Curiosity gets the better of you. You slip down to where he stood and spot something on the stone scraped into the marble. Not a name. Not a message. A number. 9. A date. A code. You don't know, but it's close enough to freeze your spine, because that's less than 2 weeks away. That night, you overhear one of Lucilla's handmaidens crying, quietly, a private sob into silk sleeves. You don't interrupt, but you catch a word. List. Then another. Burned. The phrase she repeats makes your heart seize. They know who's with us. Not if, not maybe. They know, and just like that, the walls tighten again. One senator is arrested, then 2 more. A governor flees the city without notice. The empire is shifting, size dividing like plates beneath the crust. Rome begins to crack. Still Lucilla attends ceremonies. Still Aelius salutes the emperor with perfect poise. But their masks are starting to flicker. She laughs too hard at a feast. He grips his sword hilt too long. The tension hums between them like a lyre string stretched too tight. They've stopped writing now, you think. The letters are too risky, too vulnerable. But the damage is done. The scrolls, the codes, the serpent sigils, all of it has taken on a life of its own. People whisper the word consort like it's an invocation, a curse, a prophecy. And through it all, the emperor watches. Commodus may be unstable, may be distracted by gladiator fantasies and self-worship, but he's no fool. His eyes linger longer on his sister during public ceremonies. He questions more decrees. He dismisses more guards. His smile is stretched too thin. He knows something's coming. You know it too. Something's shifting. And no one, no letter, no lie, no lover, is safe anymore. You can feel the emperor watching, not just in the way a ruler watches his subjects from the marble throne, or how a lion surveys a pit before leaping in. No, Commodus is watching with calculation now. The theatricality is gone, the lazy arrogance, the smug glances, those have been replaced by something colder. He's scanning people like a hunter marking which deer limps the most. And unfortunately there are a lot of limping deer in Rome these days. He doesn't say anything outright, of course. That's not how emperors operate. But there's a quiet fury humming beneath every decree. New restrictions appear without explanation. Visitors to the palace are questioned more harshly. Letters vanish before reaching their owners. An entire shift of Praetorian guards is replaced overnight. Their names scratched off the records. It's like watching a curtain catch bad fire, silent at first until the whole room smells like smoke. Lucilla pretends not to notice. She continues hosting her quiet dinners, meeting with senators, wearing purple in subtle defiance of tradition. Purple, reserved for emperors, not widows, not women, but she doesn't care anymore. She knows eyes are on her. She knows Commodus suspects something, and if that worries her, she doesn't show it. She wears her defiance like perfume, and Aelius? He's changed too. Gone is the laughing general who once disarmed enemies with a glance. In his place is a colder version, sharper. The man who made his reputation on bloody campaigns now walks the palace with the stiff face of someone ready for betrayal at any second. He's polite to the emperor always, but never deferential, never quite loyal. His eyes betray him just for a moment when Lucilla speaks, and Commodus sees it. You hear about it second-hand as always, this time from a palace attendant who accidentally walked into the throne room during a conversation that should have been private. The emperor had been speaking to the head of the Praetorian Guard. Only one sentence was audible before the attendant fled, but it was enough. If she thinks she's still a daughter before she's a corpse, she's wrong. Brutal, cruel, but also scared. Because here's your historical fact tonight. Commodus was wildly insecure. Despite being the son of Marcus Aurelius, one of Rome's most respected emperors, he never lived up to the ideals of his lineage. He craved adoration, not leadership, glory, not governance. And when that glory was threatened, by rebellion, by satire, by even the whisper of disloyalty, he lashed out. Usually too hard, usually too late. Fringe fact? Commodus once executed a nobleman for dreaming that he wore the purple robe. A dream. When the accused tried to argue he couldn't control what he dreamed, Commodus supposedly replied, "Then you should have dreamed I stayed emperor." That's the kind of man now watching Lucilla and Aelius. And here's the debate. Was Commodus just reacting to paranoia? Or did he have proof? Some claim he had intercepted scrolls, captured messengers, even coerced confessions from tortured slaves. Others argue that he had nothing, just the tremble in his gut when he saw his sister speak too confidently and her favourite general nod too subtly. The third view? He didn't care about proof. The moment he felt like he was losing control, that was enough. You start noticing the signs, the shift in temperature, the way the guards' sandals echo louder at night like they're marching for intimidation now. One day you find a statue in the gardens, an old one of Marcus Aurelius, with its nose chipped and a crack running straight through the heart. Maybe an accident, or maybe a message. Lucilla sees it too. She walks past it during a rare daytime stroll, Aelius at her side. Neither of them comments, but you see her glance linger on that crack. And you know she understands. Rome is sending her signals, warning her, maybe daring her. That same evening, a senator named Tullius disappears. No trial. No announcement. He'd been a guest at one of Lucilla's private dinners just 2 nights before. His villa is sealed, his wife placed under protective watch, which everyone knows means house arrest. His name is quietly removed from official records. It's as if he never existed. That's Commodus's way. Not with daggers in the night, at least not yet, but with erasure, political death. And it's serious somehow, because death is final. Erasure is confusing, lingering, sticky. You walk more carefully now, keep your head down. You stop accepting late-night errands, stop listening at doors. Rome is becoming a different place, one ruled by suspicion, not laws. Even the gods seem quieter. The fires at the temples flicker more, like they're unsure whether to bless or burn what's coming. You hear a story, maybe apocryphal, maybe not, about a letter that reached Aelius. A single page folded in red silk carried by a woman with ink-stained hands and no shoes. It said only this: "Your fate is not written in blood but in ashes. Be ready to burn." No one knows if it was from Lucilla, or a warning, or a threat. Either way, Aelius didn't sleep that night. You know because you saw him, standing at the balcony above the forum, not moving, not speaking, just watching the city breathe beneath him. The moon high, the torches low, and something cold gleaming in his hand, a ring, a small one. Not military, not his. Lucilla's? Maybe. But even if they are still lovers, and no one can prove that now, it's clear they've become something else too. Co-conspirators, co-commanders, their bond has hardened into something ironclad, something that doesn't need touches or glances anymore. They are a two-headed wolf pacing just outside the Emperor's door. And you start wondering how long you can survive standing in the middle of it all. Because now it's not just a love story, or a power struggle. Now it's war. The tension hits its crescendo not with a trumpet blast or a sword drawn, but with a raised eyebrow in the Senate. It's subtle, as Rome's greatest terrors often are. A quiet meeting convened at an awkward hour, early enough that half the senators are still nursing headaches from last night's banquet, late enough that no one can use scheduling as an excuse not to attend. No official agenda is announced. That alone sends half the forum into panic. And when word leaks that Commodus has sent a representative to speak on his behalf, Rome holds its breath. You're not in the room, of course, but you're in the hallway outside. The kind of hallway where people don't just pass through. They hover, hoping to catch half of a word, a tone of voice, a shout. All you hear, though, is quiet. Unnatural quiet. That's never a good sign. Inside, the Emperor's chosen speaker is Lucius Marcellus, a man who looks like he was carved out of chalk and misery. Everyone hates him. Even his hairline seems disappointed in him. But he speaks with the weight of imperial authority, which means no one dares laugh when he begins by saying, "There is concern regarding loyalty within our own walls. Not beyond, not from barbarian raiders or rebellious governors. Within." Everyone knows exactly who he's talking about. Lucilla's name isn't spoken aloud, not once. Neither is Aelius's, but terms like influence, deviation, ambition are flung around like poisoned darts. When one senator dares to ask if these concerns relate to those closely associated with the imperial family, Marcellus simply smiles and says, "Those closest to the sun are often the first to burn." It's not subtle. It's not meant to be. By the time the meeting ends, Half the senators leave in a daze, the other half retreating to their villas with their wills freshly rewritten. You see one of them scribbling something into the folds of his sleeve as he walks. Insurance, probably. Or a suicide note that's trying to pass for a shopping list. Here's your historical fact for fact tonight. Political speech in Rome was a dance of deadly euphemism. You didn't accuse directly, you implied. You didn't charge someone with treason, you questioned their Roman virtue. And if you wanted someone removed, you didn't ask. You expressed concern for their future. It was diplomacy, sure. But it was also code for exile, ruin, or execution. Fringe fact, there's a scroll in a museum in Naples that lists the names of people exiled during the final years of Commodus's reign. 2/3 of the list have notes beside them, cryptic ones like, for talking too loud or smiled at the wrong time. One just says loved too visibly. That last one is the kind of note that feels more like poetry than paperwork. Scholars still debate what exactly triggered the Senate's shift. Some think it was that meeting, an invisible line crossed by the emperor's representative. Others believe a key piece of evidence was suddenly discovered. A forged decree, an intercepted scroll, maybe even a confession. But some argue it wasn't a trigger, it was a slow rot, and the Senate finally realised the tree was about to fall. You don't sleep much that week. Every corner of the palace seems filled with new shadows. Guards you don't recognise appear at the gates. The usual palace dogs, sleek hounds used to lounging near the fountains, are gone, replaced by the lean, tense war beasts used during military parades. And late at night, you hear the clatter of weapons where there should only be silence. Something is being prepared, and it's not a party. Lucilla, though, remains composed. You see her twice that week, once during a public blessing at the Temple of Juno, where she smiles faintly beneath a veil of violet silk, and once walking alone along the palace's western garden wall. The second time she's holding something, a scroll, yes, but not in a hiding way, in a proud way. You swear you see her reading it aloud to herself. Aelius? He's harder to spot. His movements are now so deliberately erratic you wonder if even he knows where he'll be next. One moment he's in the stables, barking orders about grain supplies. The next, he's sitting with young officers at a tavern, drinking only water and talking about the old ways. Everyone's looking for him. No one can pin him down. Until one evening, when you finally hear it, a private confrontation. Not between lovers, between brothers, because yes, technically, Aelius and Commodus aren't blood. But Rome loves to pretend everyone's family when it's convenient. And this is convenient. The story comes from a merchant's son who happened to be delivering wine to the wrong entrance at the wrong time. He says the shouting began before the doors were even closed. Accusations, threats, one of them, maybe Aelius, screamed, "Then end it if you dare." Then the sound of something breaking. The merchant's son ran, smart boy. You wonder what was said, what was threatened, and how long it will be before that threat becomes action. Because this isn't just court drama anymore, this is structural collapse. You see it everywhere. In the way governors are no longer answering imperial summons, in the way soldiers on patrol bow more deeply to Aelius than to the emperor's seal, in the way statues of Lucilla have started to appear in strange places, private gardens, bathhouses, even tucked discreetly into the corner of a brothel wall. They're for small, half-busts made of cheap clay, but they're deliberate. Icons, like someone's trying to build a goddess out of her. Even the common people have noticed. A boy selling nuts in the street mutters, "She'll fix this place," as Lucilla's litter passes. His mother slaps the back of his head so hard his teeth clack. But it's out there, in the air, in the streets, in the walls. Rome is choosing sides, and Commodus knows it. The emperor may be erratic, childish, and unhinged, but he knows when he's being circled. His speeches become shorter, his private guards double. A new decree is issued banning gatherings of more than 5 persons with shared blood ties. It's aimed at Lucilla. No one says her name, but everyone knows. She reads the decree herself the following day in front of the Temple of Concord, out loud, with a smile, and then she walks away. That's not a response. That's a warning. They say love moves mountains. In Rome, it moves legions. Word spreads like fire in dry hay. Aelius has been reassigned to oversee the border defences in the north. Reassigned. That's the word used on the official tablet. What it really means is banished, separated. Cut off from the web of influence he and Lucilla have been weaving for months. Commodus might not be able to strike openly, not yet, But he can make things inconvenient. He can send Aelius hundreds of miles away, where messages take days to arrive and support withers in the cold. It's a smart move, honestly. Distance breaks a lot of things, friendships, conspiracies, hearts. But Lucilla isn't most people, and Aelius isn't the kind of man who obeys an order just because it's stamped with an eagle. The news of his reassignment arrives at the palace the same day a small riot breaks out in the forum. No one connects the two publicly, but everyone feels the undercurrent. A fight between grain suppliers, supposedly, dispute about weights and payments, but the timing is suspicious, and when you hear that one of the men involved kept shouting, "We bleed for her!" you start to suspect the riots were never about bread. They were about Lucilla. You see her that evening, standing at the balcony overlooking the city as the sun dies behind the aqueducts. She's not in her usual velvets or crimson robes tonight. She's in white, simple, clean, dangerous. She looks like a ghost that knows it's going to outlive everyone. That's when you notice the seal in her hand. A ring, not the one she usually wears with the imperial crest. This one is older. It bears the emblem of Mars, the god of war. It's Aelius's. Somehow, some way, it's made its way back to her. Either a message, a goodbye, or a promise. You don't know which is worse. Here's your historical fact, but Roman generals were often reassigned not for tactical needs, but for political manoeuvring. Sending someone to Gaul or the eastern provinces was as much about keeping them away from Rome as it was about border control. It was exile dressed up as honour. And if a general happened to die in the field, well, Rome was always full of martyrs. Fringe fact, there's an obscure diary, half-charred, possibly fake, but just believable enough, that claims Lucilla once sent Aelius a lock of her hair braided with gold thread before he left on a campaign. The message attached said, "So you don't forget the empire behind you." Scholars dismiss it, of course, but that diary? It vanished from the archive within a year of its discovery. The scholarly debate centres around one maddening question. Was Aelius's reassignment part of Lucilla's plan, or the thing that shattered it? Some historians argue she anticipated this, knew that Commodus would try to divide them, and had already set things in motion to make distance irrelevant. Others believe it was the breaking point. That without Aelius physically in the capital, her influence began to rot. You see signs of decay almost immediately. Her dinners grow smaller, guests begin cancelling, invitations go unanswered. The loyalty she once commanded with a glance now requires quiet persuasion, extra coin, soft threats. And still there are fewer and fewer who come. The Senate too grows colder, more cautious. There's a new faction rising. Loyalists to the Emperor who believe Rome's survival requires purging anyone with a whiff of rebellion. You hear one of them boast in the bathhouse. Let her fall like Caesar's dreams. Classy. But Lucilla doesn't retreat. She doubles down. One night you're summoned, quietly, without explanation, to an underground chamber beneath the palace. You hesitate, obviously. Because who wouldn't, but you go, curiosity's a disease like that. The room is small, torch-lit, and smells like old papyrus and wet limestone. She's waiting inside, seated behind a marble table etched with old family crests. There are 3 people with her, none you recognise, but their posture screams soldier, not senator. She gestures for you to step closer. You do, and then she says something that chills you to your core. Tell me what they're saying in the kitchens, not the Senate. Not the guards, the kitchens. She's not gathering gossip, she's gathering morale, measuring it like wine in a goblet, calculating the moment it will overflow. You tell her, you say what you've heard, that the Emperor fears her, that Aelius's name is still spoken in toasts, that one of the newer slaves wears a brooch with her symbol carved into the pin. She listens, not like a noble, like a general. Then she hands you something, a coin, heavy, copper, not gold. One side bears the head of her father, Marcus Aurelius. The other side is blank, polished so smooth it almost shines. Keep it, she says. If you're ever stopped, say you're on family business. You don't ask what she means. You don't want to know. You leave the room with your stomach flipping and the coin burning in your palm. It's not currency. It's protection. Or maybe a death sentence, depending on who finds it. That week, 3 more minor officials disappear. A 4th is found floating face down in a fountain near the Temple of Saturn. No one says it out loud, but everyone knows it's Commodus. Testing the waters, seeing who notices, who mourns, who panics. Lucilla doesn't flinch. She attends every ceremony, smiles at every senator. hosts a public reading of Virgil in her private garden, even invites the emperor himself to a feast in her honour. He declines, of course, but the invite alone is its own power move. She's not hiding, she's daring. That's when the letters start again. Not between her and Aelius this time. These are different, wider, strategic. Little notes passed hand to hand across Rome and beyond. Letters that whisper of change, of a better Rome, of a coming tide. They're unsigned, but everyone knows the tone, knows the cadence. Some are burned on sight. Others are copied and passed again. And you start carrying your coin everywhere, because whether you asked for it or not, you're officially part of this now. And if Commodus is watching, as you know he is, then every step you take is being measured against how loyal you look. The city is splitting, slowly, quietly, but decisively. And it all started with love letters. By now, Rome has two faces. One wears laurel crowns, sips from silver goblets, and pretends nothing is wrong. This is the Rome of official processions, of tightly choreographed temple rituals and speeches so dull they could put the gods to sleep. Here, the emperor still waves from balconies, still throws coins to cheering crowds, still claims to be divinely favoured. This Rome smiles. The other face, well, it snarls. This is the Rome you walk through at dawn when the alleys are slick with spilled oil and blood, and the walls bloom with symbols no one admits to drawing. A she-wolf here, a serpent with two heads there, a cracked crown, even stranger, a series of the dots carved in stone in perfect rows. 5, then 2, then 1. Some say it's a code, others say it's a countdown. Whatever it is, it means people are choosing, and Lucilla is counting. You see her less often now, not because she's retreating, but because her movements are no longer meant to be seen. The woman who once made declarations with her gowns and silences now slips through the palace like wind through cracks. You spot her once, just barely, in the reflection of a bronze shield leaning against the armory wall. She's talking to a man you don't recognise. Later, someone tells you he's a centurion whose loyalty was bought with the promise of a province. Aelius, meanwhile, is still gone, physically at least, but his presence haunts everything. His name is still muttered in training yards. Young officers still quote him. One even starts wearing a red sash across his shoulder, the same colour Aelius favoured during his last triumph. No one dares stop him. Not yet. Then comes the news. A legion stationed near the Rhine has refused to swear loyalty to Commodus. That alone is enough to trigger a dozen Senate meetings, but what really sets the forum buzzing is the letter they received instead. A wax tablet with no signature, sealed with an unfamiliar crest. A serpent eating its own tail. Sound familiar? You hear the message second-hand, recited by a courier, who has no idea what he's holding. We pledge ourselves not to a name, but to the future Rome deserves. It's elegant. It's damning. It's war in prose. Here's your historical fact. Roman legions were expected to swear a formal oath of allegiance called the Sacramentum to the emperor himself. Refusing to do so wasn't just treason, it was religious heresy. The act blurred the line between political rebellion and sacrilege, which, in Rome, was a pretty efficient way to get crucified. Fringe fact, some rebels used signal rings, spinning copper bands with rotating emblems to indicate which side they supported. One of these was recovered centuries later from a collapsed villa just outside Rome, a ring with a tiny image of a woman holding a torch. Underneath her feet, a lion turned away from the viewer. Some scholars believe it represented Lucilla herself, illuminating the empire while the emperor turned his back. And here's the scholarly debate. Did Lucilla send the letter to the Rhine? Was it her hand that wrote those lines? Her seal that closed it? Or was it Aelius writing in exile, still playing general from afar? A third theory insists the message came from neither of them, just one of their many silent followers, proving that the rebellion had outgrown its founders. The idea had become more powerful than the people behind it. You don't know which theory is true, you just know the city is bracing for impact. The emperor responds, of course, he always does, though never fast enough to seem in control. His answer is theatrical, a speech delivered in full gladiator armour. Standing in the Colosseum, flanked by a lion on a chain and two frightened priests trying not to pass out. He roars about loyalty, divinity, betrayal. His voice cracks halfway through. The lion falls asleep. The crowd cheers out of habit. Later that night, a senator is poisoned. Not discreetly. He dies in full view of the public during a banquet while raising a goblet of wine that apparently disagreed with him. The rumour? He'd spoken well of Lucilla the day before. You don't know if it's true, but it doesn't matter. Everyone believes it, and fear works just as well as fact. Lucilla doesn't comment publicly, she doesn't need to. Every time the Emperor lashes out, her silence echoes louder. She lets the violence discredit him, lets the blood sharpen her contrast. The more unstable Commodus becomes, the more noble she seems, regal, restrained, deliberate. But you begin to notice cracks in her mask. Tiny ones. A brief flinch when a door slams too hard. A moment where she forgets a name she should know. You hear from a steward that she's begun speaking in her sleep, softly, but always the same phrase. No crown is worth this. And still she doesn't stop. She meets with governors, with old friends of her father. She quietly ensures that when Aelius returns, he won't be alone. There's a plan. You can feel it forming, like storm clouds pulling tight behind the mountains. Then comes the scroll, you find it tucked in your cot one morning. You don't know how it got there. You're not important enough for messages, but here it is, sealed in wax, blank on the outside. You break it open with shaking hands. Inside, one line. 12th. 9th. Hold the garden door, you're not invisible. You sit with that message for a long time. It means you've been seen. It means they trust you, or need you, or both. And that date? That number Aelius carved into the stone weeks ago? It's not a code, it's a deadline. 12:19. You check the calendar, it's 4 days from now, you don't sleep, you don't eat much either. You walk through Rome like it's already been emptied. You see soldiers practicing in the yards with dull swords, courtiers whispering behind columns. Even the gods seem uneasy. A statue of Jupiter is struck by lightning during a brief morning storm. The priests call it a sign of renewal. Others call it a warning. Lucilla calls it nothing. She doesn't flinch, she just sends more messages, and waits for the day to come. There's something strange about the way the sky looks on the 12th day before the calends of January. It's not quite overcast, but the clouds hang low, swollen and heavy, casting Rome in a lightless grey. Everything feels slower, like the city is holding its breath, waiting for the wrong word to slip out. Or maybe the right one. Even the doves in the forum coo in uneasy intervals, fluttering from statues to rooftops without reason. This is the day you're supposed to hold the garden door. That quiet message still burns in your memory like a coal pressed into silk. You haven't told anyone, not even the other servants you trust most. Because in Rome, secrets don't stay secrets. They become leverage, and then weapons. And if you're going to play even a background part in what feels like a slow-burning revolution, you might as well play it soundly. So you rehearse, mentally, every step, every exit. The garden door in question sits behind a marble arch draped with flowering vines, mostly used by attendants and aging senators who need a moment to catch their breath. It's rarely locked. Guards pass by only occasionally, preferring the front gates for their posturing. No one would notice if you simply stood there a few minutes longer than necessary. No one except Lucilla. You haven't seen her today, not yet. She's vanished from the public spaces, skipped the morning rites, and cancelled her usual scroll readings. That alone is enough to make people talk. One senator muttered, "She's ill," and another replied, "No, she's busy." That second one scared you more. By mid-afternoon, the rumours shift. There's been a break in protocol. A military unit was spotted near the palace gates, unusual for this time of year, especially during the lull before Saturnalia. They weren't praetorians. They weren't even in parade uniform. Someone says they bore the crest of Legio XIV, the 14th, Aelius's old command, but that shouldn't be possible. He's still in the north, right? Here's your historical fact for tonight. Lucilla's real-life plot against Commodus involved a carefully timed return of loyal soldiers from outside the capital. Though many details have been lost or twisted, one thing is widely agreed upon. She didn't act alone. Her influence among the legions, even without formal rank, was unmatched for a woman of her era. When she called, some of them listened. Fringe fact, a single gold coin minted in Noricum during this era bears the image of a female figure holding a lightning bolt, something usually reserved for Jupiter. Most experts say it's allegorical. A few insist it's Lucilla in disguise. meant for distribution among the legions to inspire loyalty to a new divine order. If that's true, someone was already preparing for a new emperor, and maybe a new empress too. The scholarly debate focuses on one critical point. Was Aelius already back in Rome on this day? Official records suggest no. But there are inconsistencies in the Praetorian duty rosters, and a pair of city guards are later found dead near the western aqueduct, their armour looted and insignias missing. Some believe Aelius slipped in with a cloaked escort right under Commodus's nose. Others believe he never left. That his reassignment was fiction and he spent the weeks hidden, coordinated by Lucilla through messengers and masks. You don't know which version is true. All you know is that the garden door is open and you're standing beside it. It's early evening. The lamps haven't been lit yet, so the palace glows with that twilight dullness that blurs shadows into people. You pretend to sweep. You glance toward the marble archway. Nothing yet, but you know something's coming. Then soft steps, not marching, moving with intent. From around the corner a figure emerges. Not Aelius, not yet. This man is older, in senator's robes, and he doesn't look at you as he passes, just nods. Behind him, two others. One woman, one man, dressed too plainly to be part of the court. Their expressions are blank, so neutral it's almost painful. You step aside, they don't speak. They vanish into the garden, swallowed by ivy and silence. And then, the sound of boots, slow, measured, deliberate. You hold your breath, one hand on the doorframe. A figure in a cloak steps through the archway. For a moment you think it's just another noble trying to sneak in late to dinner, but then he pushes the hood back. Aelius. You nearly forget to breathe. He doesn't look like a rebel general, not in this moment. He looks like a man who hasn't slept in days. There's stubble on his face and his hair has grown out, streaked with grey that wasn't there the last time you saw him. But his eyes are still razor sharp. They scan you once, not with suspicion, with acknowledgement. You nod. He nods. And then he steps through the door. No fanfare, no speech, just purpose. He's not alone. More figures follow, each one emerging like phantoms, a silent procession entering a palace through a door that's always overlooked. You recognise two faces, former captains now officially retired. Another is an aide who disappeared from court months ago, all back now, all with the same expression. Then she arrives. Lucilla. She moves without guards, without fear, her cloak dragging over the garden stones like the hem of a coronation robe. The look on her face is not triumph, it's clarity. She nods once at you, just once. And in that gesture she thanks you, forgives you, and warns you all at once. This is happening. Tonight. You watch them disappear into the inner palace, their route hidden through corridors only Lucilla could have charted. A trail of silent rebellion, woven through marble and memory. You don't know what exactly will happen next, whether there will be blood or bargaining, whether Commodus will be arrested in his sleep or dragged before the Senate in chains. But you know this, something irreversible has just begun. The Empire will never look the same again. And you? You just open the door. You wait by the door longer than you should. Your hands are shaking, though you've done nothing but hold a broom and nod once. The garden behind you feels too quiet now, like the silence is listening back. You glance around, half expecting someone to pull you aside and ask what you've just allowed into the palace, but no one's looking. The guards at the gate are talking to each other about dice games. The senators are inside drinking watered-down wine. The city is oblivious. You slip away before someone can ask why you're standing there empty-handed. Back through the service corridors, past a torch that flickers a little too much, and down a hallway that smells like stone and sweat. No one stops you. You're invisible again, which, for now, is the safest way to be. But deep in the marble heart of the palace, the invisible are watching. You hear the first signal just before midnight. It's not a shout or a horn. It's a knock. 3 slow, deliberate raps on the wall of the west wing, then silence. Then 2 more knocks, spaced wider. You wouldn't think anything of it if you didn't know what day it was. Then you hear it again, farther down, echoed by someone else. They're moving. You race to your usual spot in the archives, the one with the loose tile where you can peek into the central chamber. You don't know what you're expecting to see. Smoke, screaming, Commodus hurling wine goblets while shouting curses to Jupiter. Instead, you see a torch being passed from hand to hand. A circle has formed. 7 figures in cloaks, 2 of them women. Aelius stands at the centre. He's speaking, but you can't hear the words. only the tone, steady, controlled. This isn't a rebellion thrown together with desperation. This is a chess move, the final one. Lucilla steps beside him. She's dressed in ceremonial robes now, white trimmed with imperial purple, hair braided in the old style, like a vestal virgin preparing for a rite. She doesn't speak. She just lays a single object on the table in front of them. A knife. You feel your heart stop for a beat. Because this isn't a rebellion anymore. This is judgment. Here's your historical fact. Roman coups weren't always grand battles. Often, they began with quiet ceremonies like this one. Oaths sworn in shadows. Commands passed by nods. Violence sanctioned not by votes, but by divine suggestion and legal ambiguity. All it took was a handful of men in the right place, with the right swords, and the empire would shift beneath their feet. Fringe fact, in an obscure military manual attributed to a now-lost general, there's a passage detailing rites of ancient succession, code for non-violent palace takeovers. The ritual required an oath, a symbolic object, usually a weapon, and a vow made by torchlight. Some historians believe this ritual was performed exactly once during the reign of Commodus. No names are listed, but the timing fits. The debate among scholars is always the same. Did Lucilla intend for Commodus to be removed, or killed? Some argue that she hoped he would step aside quietly, that his advisors could convince him to abdicate. Others say she knew better, that emperors don't retire, they die, and she was preparing for that. Whatever her true intention, you watch the next part unfold with hands pressed to your mouth. Aelius kneels. Lucilla places the knife in his hand. He looks at it, just for a moment, then hands it to one of the cloaked men. The torch is passed again. The knife vanishes beneath a robe. You know exactly what's about to happen. The emperor is going to die tonight. You want to believe there will be a final speech, a dramatic moment, maybe even a chance for Commodus to see who's betraying him and beg, rage, or strike back. There isn't. The emperor is asleep in his quarters, surrounded by servants who've already been bribed, guards who've already looked away. The only witness will be the man carrying the knife. You never see him again. You don't even know his name. All you know is that by dawn everything is different, but not in the way you expect, because the next morning Commodus is still alive. He emerges from his chambers late, bleary-eyed, shirtless, demanding water, and complaining of stomach pain. His servants hover nervously. One of them, a boy who always wears sandals too large, keeps looking at the floor, not at the emperor, at the stain on the rug. You hear about it hours later. The knife never reached its mark. It was found beneath the bed, unsheathed, bloody, but not with imperial blood. One of the guards was dead, throat cut. An assassin had entered but had been intercepted. Whether by mistake or betrayal, no one knows. Commodus lived. For now. And Rome is on fire. Not literally, not yet, but emotionally, politically. The streets hum with confusion. The Senate is in chaos. Soldiers are recalled. The palace is locked down. And Commodus, paranoid, furious, shaking with rage, has begun ordering arrests. Lucilla doesn't run. She appears that afternoon in the Temple of Mars, calm and dressed in white, praying with an open scroll in her hand. A show of innocence. A dare. A warning. You see her lips move. You see the way her eyes do not lift. But later that night, her chambers are sealed. Guards take position at her doors. The emperor says nothing publicly, but Rome knows, and you saw it all. You held the door that began a coup. You watched the torch pass. And now, with every passing hour, you're waiting for the empire to decide whether this ends in forgiveness or fire. By morning, the city is vibrating, not with noise, though there is plenty of that, but with tension. Every step on the cobblestones feels charged, like sparks dancing just beneath the surface. Rome doesn't erupt all at once. It creaks, shudders, and then cracks with the sudden finality of breaking marble. And today, it is very close to breaking. The news is out. There's no more whispering behind curtains or half-smiles exchanged over goblets of wine. Word has leaked, slid through the palace gates like oil. Someone tried to assassinate the emperor, someone with access, someone from inside, but of course that's not even the real news. The real story is that Commodus survived. You hear it from a flower seller in the Forum of all people. She says, "The gods won't take him. Even the underworld spat him back." She says it with a laugh, but her hands shake as she arranges violets. because now that he's still breathing, there's only one question in everyone's mind. Who's next? Commodus doesn't wait long to respond. He never does. By midday, the first of the decrees is issued, handwritten by imperial scribes and delivered to every major district in the city. It's not subtle. It names no names, but it drips with fury. Any who conspire with chaos will be met with fire and rope. The gods demand order. The empire will be purified. Purified. You know what that means, and so does everyone else. The arrests begin that evening, quietly at first. A senator pulled aside on his way home. A minor noble's steward taken in for questioning. Then a whole wing of the palace staff is replaced overnight. You recognise one of the faces among the missing. A servant who once spilled oil near Lucilla's chambers. He was always too curious. By nightfall, the first public execution is announced. You're there, not because you want to be, but because you're swept along in the crowd like driftwood in a flood. The condemned is a young man, not important, not famous, a former military courier, charged with delivering seditious material. You know that means letters. You know whose letters they're talking about. The execution is efficient. No fanfare, no speech, just a sword, a stone platform, and a silence so dense you feel it in your teeth. This isn't justice, this is a warning. Here's your historical fact tonight. Commodus was infamous for his purges, waves of politically motivated executions that had little to do with guilt and everything to do with control. He used fear the way other emperors used armies. During one of his longest purges, over 300 people were executed in under 2 weeks, many for nothing more than association with perceived traitors. Fringe fact, there's a letter now kept in the archives of a monastery near Bologna, allegedly written by a woman from the imperial household during this time. In it she describes a wall of substance growing within the palace. Her final line reads, "We breathe still, but each breath is borrowed." The scholars can't decide whether the purge was a panicked overreaction or a planned response. Some argue that Commodus always intended to eliminate threats and simply waited for an excuse. Others believe he truly feared for his life and lashed out in a haze of terror. A third theory claims that his advisors, especially a particularly ambitious chamberlain, pushed him into bloodshed to protect themselves. You believe all of them, because you've seen it happening. You've walked past the empty rooms, smelled the smoke of scrolls being burned, watched as names vanish from doorways. You pass one hallway that used to be bustling with scribes and now echoes like a tomb. Lucilla remains sealed in her quarters. No word, no appearances, no explanations, but she hasn't been executed, not yet. That fact alone is stunning. Commodus, for all his instability, has paused just before the edge. Some say he's hesitating because of love. Others because he knows killing a member of the imperial family, his own sister no less, would send shockwaves even he can't control. The Senate is divided. The people are torn. She still has supporters, silent ones maybe, but powerful. So he waits. And she waits. You sneak near her chambers once, just to see, just to know. The guards at her door don't look angry or triumphant. They look scared. One crosses himself with a gesture borrowed from the East. Superstition maybe, or respect, or guilt. Through the crack in the wall you hear something, Lucilla singing, softly, a lullaby. The same one you heard her hum once to her son years ago when he was sick with fever. You don't know whether it comforts or unnerves you. She's not broken, not afraid, she's waiting. And then come the rumours, that Aelius escaped the palace, that he never entered it at all, that he's been seen near the city gates, cloaked and mounted, speaking to merchants in whispers, that he's gone to the legions, that he's raising support, that he's returning with 5,000 men, or 10,000, or that he's already in the palace catacombs planning the next strike. You hear every version. You believe all of them. Because if there's one thing Rome excels at, it's taking truth and soaking it in legend until it's too slippery to hold. The guards are tenser now, the streets emptier. People speak in coded phrases. The storm is shifting, or the lion blinked. You hear one that chills your blood. If the moon can't rule the sky, she'll pull down the stars. You think they mean Lucilla. And if that's true, then she isn't done. Not yet. You don't hear the scream, you feel it. Somewhere deep in the palace, muffled by corridors and thick velvet curtains, a sound cuts through the marble like a blade. Not a loud cry, but one of those sharp, guttural noises that travels through the floor and into your bones. You're near the atrium when it happens, sweeping ash from a cold brazier, and suddenly everything in you goes still. For a second, even the torches flicker, as if Rome itself flinched. You wait. Listen. Footsteps, quick, armoured, panicked, race past the corridor just outside. A second later a bell rings. One chime, then another. Not the ceremonial kind. This is the emergency bell. The one the guards use when something's gone very wrong. You drop your broom, no one notices, because suddenly everyone is moving, servants scatter, messengers run like blood through veins. A senator's aide slips in olive oil and keeps crawling on hands and knees, muttering, "Wasn't supposed to happen yet." You press yourself into a shadowed corner, hoping to be ignored, and watch as chaos blooms like a bruise across the palace. And then the word comes. Assassination. The word passes from mouth to mouth. Too quickly for anyone to clarify who exactly has been assassinated. You think Commodus. It has to be. Maybe someone finished what they started days ago. Maybe Aelius returned and struck in the night, hidden in the folds of a dream. Maybe Lucilla's waiting game finally cracked the throne. But then you hear the name, not Commodus. Senator Varinus. And just like that, the room shifts again, because Varinus was no ordinary noble. He was a mouthpiece for the emperor, the man who authored the last 3 purge decrees, the man who publicly accused Lucilla, though never by name, of wielding beauty as betrayal. The man who insisted Aelius had never been loyal, now he's dead. Throat slashed in the marble bathhouse near the Senate chamber. No witnesses, no guards posted, just the steam from the bath and the blood smeared across the lion-shaped drain. You don't cheer, you don't weep, you simply brace, because retaliation always comes next. Here's your historical fact for tonight. Political assassinations in Rome were as common as bad wine, and bathhouses, with their slippery floors and lack of armour, were ideal locations. Dozens of prominent men were murdered mid-soak. The most common method? A blade beneath the towel or slipped between the ribs while the victim turned to greet a supposed ally. Fringe fact? In the days following Varinus' death, a tiny clay figurine was found beneath his villa's front step, crudely shaped like a man with a missing tongue and broken hands. Some claimed it was a curse doll left by someone loyal to Lucilla. Others said it was placed afterward, by those who celebrated the act and wanted to leave a signature. And the debate among scholars? Was the killing ordered by Lucilla? Was it revenge for her confinement? A calculated strike to rattle Commodus' support? Or was it a rogue act, someone acting in her name without her consent? A third theory suggests it was Commodus himself eliminating a pawn who had outlived his usefulness, blaming it on the rebels to justify further purges. Whatever the truth, Rome believes she did it, Lucilla, even though she's still locked in her chambers, still under watch. Or maybe because she is, because to pull off something like this from behind a sealed door makes her even more terrifying. And in a city obsessed with power, fear is always a kind of respect. The Senate goes into emergency session. The Emperor does not attend. Instead, Commodus issues a new decree through a courier draped in black. The city is under divine threat. All rituals are to cease. All temples are closed. You've never seen anything like it. The gods themselves are being dismissed. Priests stand in doorways, bewildered. The Vestals weep. Altars go cold. People begin muttering that the Emperor has gone mad, that he fears Lucilla more than Jupiter, and they were not wrong. You hear another phrase more and more in the streets. She is the storm. Not causing the storm, is the storm. You see it in the way statues of Commodus are quietly defaced overnight, noses chipped off, inscriptions rewritten. You pass one in the forum where someone has scratched "false god" into the base. A priest is trying to scrub it off with vinegar and linen, but the words remain faintly etched, as if refusing to be silenced. The purge continues, but its ant starts to feel desperate. Sloppy, wrong names are taken, friends of suspected conspirators, a baker who once sold cakes to Aelius's cousin, one of the scribes who copied a speech for Lucilla last spring. One night you find a scroll half-burned in the palace refuse bin. You recognise the handwriting. It's hers, Lucilla. It's not a message, it's a speech. There is no crown without consent, no empire without heart. A throne built on fear is a throne crumbling already. It was never read aloud. Maybe it was meant for the day after the plan succeeded, or maybe it was always meant to be hidden. Either way, it feels like prophecy. You tuck it inside your tunic and say nothing, because now there's a feeling growing in your chest, something tight and trembling, like the air before lightning strikes, a knowledge that the final move hasn't happened yet. That the blood spilling through the bathhouse drains was only the beginning. The wound is open, the city's nerves are exposed, and everyone knows what's coming next. Commodus will strike back. Lucilla will not bend. And the people, they're watching, listening, choosing. You see it in the baker's shop when someone hangs a tiny coin on a nail above the doorway, a coin with Lucilla's face scratched into it. You see it in the amphitheatre, where a cheer goes up not for the emperor, but for the gladiator who throws down his sword and walks away. You see it in yourself as you refold her lost speech and hide it deeper in your sleeve. The empire is shaking, and you're standing on the fault line. It begins with fire, not everywhere, not all at once, but in scattered pockets across the city, flames flicker to life like someone is lighting a trail of oil with a single match. First, a granary near the Aventine burns, then a warehouse along the Tiber, then, most tellingly, the Temple of Concord, a place meant for unity, diplomacy, peace, is reduced to smouldering rubble. No one claims responsibility, which means everyone knows who did it, or who they want to blame. The city wakes to ash in the air. Thin grey flakes drift over rooftops, gathering in corners like the ghosts of all the things Rome is about to lose. You taste smoke with every breath, and no one asks where it came from. They already know it's not the kind that comes from hearths or kitchens. It's the other kind. The kind that signals a city on the edge of fracture. Commodus does what he always does. He overreacts. By midday, a new decree is issued, more brutal than any before it. Martial law. The Senate is suspended. Citizens are forbidden from leaving their districts after sundown. Any gathering of more than 3 people is declared treason. And worst of all, the Emperor activates the Black Cloaks, the imperial enforcers who answer only to him and whose methods are never questioned, because no one ever survives to ask. You see them at dusk storming through the streets in pairs, tall, faceless behind their leather masks, swords drawn, sandaled and assailant on stone. They don't speak, they don't warn, they just disappear people. By nightfall the city is whispering of nothing else. The Black Cloaks are back, and no one, not even the palace, feels safe. You return to your quarters and find a red ribbon tied to your door. Nothing fancy, a piece of fraying linen stained with wax. But it's a signal. You've seen it once before, tied to the latch of a senator who was arrested the next morning and never seen again. You untie it carefully, heart hammering. Inside is a note. One word. Soon. You burn it in your lamp flame and pretend it never existed. But of course it does exist, because you know what's happening. You know Rome isn't in control anymore. Not the emperor, not the senate, not the guards. It belongs to fear now, and fear, like any living thing, can be fed, or used. You see Lucilla again 2 nights later, not in public, not at all where you expect. She appears at the old training grounds beneath the palace, where the gladiators once practiced before private tournaments. You're there on an errand, pretending to tidy storage shelves, when she walks in through a side passage flanked by 2 silent women in dark cloaks. She doesn't speak to you, but she sees you. That's enough. She moves like someone walking into her own grave, slow, steady, certain. No guards, no fanfare, her face a gaunt but fierce, all the softness burned away. You don't know how she got out of her sealed quarters, but then again Lucilla has never really obeyed doors. She walks to the centre of the practice ring and kneels. A torch is lit. A sword is drawn, not to threaten her, but to swear. One of the cloaked women kneels beside her. Another man joins, then 2 more. One by one, they press their palms to the hilt of the sword. Not above it, on it, letting the edge bite them. Blood stains the handle dark. Then Lucilla speaks. You can barely hear her, but you catch the words, "By blood, not by throne, by promise, not fear." It's not a prayer, it's an oath. Here's your historical fact for the night. Before major battles, Roman generals sometimes performed blood rituals known as devotio, a kind of self-sacrificial promise made to the gods of the underworld. They pledged themselves in exchange for victory. It wasn't official policy, but many believed it tipped fate. Fringe fact: a small inscription was found on a shattered pillar near the palace decades later. 5 Latin words, "I bled for her dream." It's never been officially attributed to anyone, but the handwriting, many say, matches a known aid of Lucilla's inner circle. Now for the debate. Was Lucilla planning another assassination? A proper one this time? Or was she preparing for full revolt? Open battle in the streets? Some scholars believe this ritual was the formation of a secret army. Others think it was symbolic, a final show of loyalty before the end. A third theory insists it was a religious rite, a last attempt to claim divine favour in a world spiralling into madness. You don't know which is true. But you know what it felt like the ground shifting under your feet. The city responds quickly. By the next morning, Commodus announces that all former generals are to be detained for questioning. Aelius's name is listed first. Still missing, still unaccounted for. The others are easier to find. They are dragged from villas, pulled from temples, found hiding in cellars, and dragged out into the sunlight like rats. One even tries to flee in priest's robes and is caught at the city gates. The message is clear, loyalty is dead, only submission remains. Still, Lucilla is not touched. He won't do it. Not yet, because deep down Commodus fears her. And because he knows the moment he moves against her, everything she represents, the rebellion, the myth, the possibility of another Rome, will no longer be a threat. It will be a martyr. You hear people arguing about it so in the forum. One man says, she should be exiled. Another says, Gub, she should be crowned. No one says she should be killed. Not out loud. The temple fires, recently reignited by defiant priests, flicker again at dusk. You walk past one and see someone drop a coin in the offering bowl. A coin with no emperor's face, just a blank disc, polished and empty. It means something now. Lucilla's name is no longer just a rumour, it's a cause. And you realise the red ribbon on your door wasn't a warning, it was an invitation. You're not the only one carrying secrets anymore. Every corner of the city seems weighed down with them, tucked in the folds of tunics, pressed behind the lips of nervous scribes, written in the ashes beneath temple braziers. Rome has become a city of codes. People speak in fragments. Eyes meet and hold it a second too long. A dropped coin might mean go, a scratched doorway might mean stay away. And in the middle of it all, the one thing that keeps surfacing, louder than any decree or order, is a story, a love story, not the romantic kind with sonnets and flowers. This is the kind that spreads through alleys and wine shops in half whispers, always with the same rhythm, the same conclusion. She loved him, and they nearly destroyed the world. Or, depending on who's telling it, they almost saved it. The letters, it turns out, were real. You find the first one by accident. Hidden inside the spine of an old scroll in the archives, a place Commodus has mostly abandoned since declaring knowledge, a dangerous weapon. You're shelving inventory when the spine splits and something small and tightly folded falls into your hand. The parchment is thin, soft with age, the ink faded, but still legible. I will not wear the crown without your hand in mine. If I am to rule, let it be with the sword you carry or not at all. No signature, but you know the writing. Lucilla. The ink curves the same way it did on the speech you found. Blend of elegance and steel. You don't show it to anyone. You don't burn it either. You tuck it into your tunic and walk out of the archive with your heart pounding, feeling like you're carrying thunder stitched into parchment. That same day, another letter surfaces. Not in the palace, in the streets. It's found on the body of a man floating in the Tiber, pockets emptied except for one item, a blood-stained scroll clutched in his hand, preserved just enough to read. This one is from Aelius. The handwriting is rougher, tighter, as if written in haste. But the message is unmistakable. You are the only crown I ever swore to. The guards claim it's a forgery, that the man was a drunk, that the letter is a plant meant to confuse the public, but no one believes them. Because even the forgeries feel real now. Truth and fiction are twisted so tightly, you can't pull them apart without unravelling the whole city. Here's your historical fact. Several of Lucilla's supposed letters to Aelius have survived in fragments, though many scholars doubt their authenticity. They appear in the Historia Augusta and in a handful of private collections, often cited as evidence of both a romantic and political bond. But others argue they were invented later, to justify or dramatise her role in the conspiracy. Fringe fact: one of the letters, rediscovered in a sealed amphora centuries later, contains a crude map drawn in the margins. The path it outlines matches an old escape tunnel beneath the Palatine Hill, rumoured to have been used by imperial fugitives. Whether Lucilla used it or Nebdun or not, the timing is suspicious. And the debate? Were the letters passionate declarations or strategic tools? Some say they were heartfelt, penned in the quiet between moments of defiance. Others insist they were performance, part of a broader propaganda campaign to win soldiers and sway the Senate. Either way, they've become the skeleton key to the entire story. Proof in some eyes that the rebellion wasn't just about power, it was about a shared vision sharpened by love. You start seeing copies of them, not the originals, but quotes, carved into walls, painted on temple steps, whispered by street performers pretending to recite poetry. A boy in the market sells strips of cloth stamped with lines from the letters. "Your crown means nothing without my sword," one says. "The empire we want does not wear a mask," says another. They're not just letters now, they're scripture, and they make Commodus furious. You hear him screaming through the stone walls one night. A frenzy of broken vases, shouted curses, the barked name of Aelius over and over like a ritual. At one point, someone says he kicked over an altar in his private chapel. Said the gods had abandoned him, that the city was choosing shadows over the sun. The next day he bans the letters, not just in speech, in thought. Any possession of the traitor's writings is a crime punishable by death. Possession, not reproduction, not circulation, just owning them. Even scribes are interrogated. The boy selling linen scraps vanishes. So does the temple where someone carved Lucilla lives into a pillar base. And just like that, the love story becomes illegal. Which, naturally, makes it even more powerful. The people don't stop, they just adapt. Now the letters are carried in fragments. Hidden in amulets, scratched into coin edges, etched into wax tablets buried under food inventories. You hear of a widow who sews the words "if I am to rule" into the hem of her mourning robes. Rome becomes a city humming with forbidden poetry. You pass a guard muttering one of the lines under his breath. You pretend not to notice. That night, in the servants' hall, someone lights a single candle and begins reciting, "This city is not yours unless it is ours. This power is not divine if it denies love." No one speaks, no one claps, but no one reports it either. Because this is what it's become. The letters, real or forged, strategic or romantic, are no longer just messages between two people. They are the bones of a movement. They are what people cling to now that the gods have been exiled and the Senate is paralysed with fear. And you start to memorize them. Not just for safety, but because they feel like truth. Not the polished truth of marble monuments or golden scrolls, but the messy, bleeding, dangerous kind. The kind that says the emperor is not the only voice in the room. The kind that reminds you rebellion can come dressed in silk and written in ink. That an empire can be undone by sentences passed hand to hand, heart to heart. Commodus might have the throne, but Lucilla and Aelius, they have the story. And in Rome, that's sometimes stronger than steel. The betrayal doesn't come with a sword, it arrives with sandals slapping too fast across the marble floor, with a pale-faced page boy breathless from running, and a scrap of blood-spattered cloth that falls to the ground like a sentence. And then, just like that, the entire palace goes cold. Because someone turned, someone inside the rebellion, someone close. You hear it first in the kitchens, from a steward who's normally too scared to even look you in the eye. Today he grabs your arm with trembling fingers and whispers, "They took her." You ask, who? You already know the answer, but you ask anyway. He says her name like it hurts. Lucilla. There's no trial, no formal arrest, no parade of guards to showcase imperial justice. Just a quiet shuffle of sandals and a black cloth thrown over her head as they lead her out the back door of her quarters. Some say she went willingly. Others say she slapped one of the black cloaks across the face before they could bind her hands. You want to believe that part. You do. But what no one argues about is how it happened. A name slips from every mouth by dusk. Titus Sextus Varro, you've seen him before. A military man, handsome in a smug, fox-eyed way. Always polite, always silent at Lucilla's dinners. She trusted him, not completely, but enough to let him sit near her while plans were discussed, while letters were reviewed, while oaths were whispered over wine, and he turned. Reported everything. You don't know if he did it for coin or safety or glory. Maybe all three, maybe none. Maybe he always planned to betray them from the first time he swore on that sword's hilt. But none of that matters now. What matters is that Lucilla is in chains. And Commodus finally has the victory he's been salivating over since the first whisper of rebellion floated through the palace like incense. Here's your historical fact. Lucilla's real downfall came after a failed assassination attempt on Commodus, allegedly plotted with a group of senators and a military officer. The plan collapsed when one of the conspirators panicked and revealed the plot. Lucilla was arrested, tried in secret, and exiled. But her story didn't end there. Fringe fact? Some records say she was not executed immediately after exile. Instead, she lived in seclusion for nearly a year, guarded day and night in a remote villa, with a single letter from her father hidden in the walls, Marcus Aurelius' final message to her. Its contents remain unknown, and some believe it was a forgery used to manipulate her final decisions. And the debate? Did she see the betrayal coming? Some historians argue she knew exactly who would turn and allowed it, used it, to protect others or to buy time. Others think she was genuinely caught off guard, blindsided by someone she'd pulled too close. A third theory: there was no betrayal at all, that the entire arrest was staged by Commodus using forged evidence and lies, and that the traitor never existed. But in the palace that day, the name Titus Varro is all anyone says, and no one defends him, not even the emperor. That's what's strangest of all. Commodus has Lucilla in custody. He's won, but he doesn't gloat. No feast, no victory parade, just silence, tight-lipped orders. A command that she beheld in the imperial mausoleum, not in the prison, not exiled to the countryside, but placed right in the tombs where emperors are buried. It's an insult disguised as honour. You go there. Of course you do. You're not supposed to, but at this point your whole life is one long list of things you're not supposed to do. You take the back stairwell, past the shrine of the household gods, and slip through a crack in the wall where the torchlight doesn't quite reach. She's there. Not bound anymore, not gagged. Sitting on a stone bench beside an unmarked sarcophagus. Her hair is undone, falling in messy braids across her shoulders. Her robe is dirty, torn at the edge. But her eyes? Still sharp. Still Lucilla. She sees you and doesn't move, doesn't speak. You kneel, not out of fear, out of mourning for what she was, for what she tried to do, for what she still might become. Then, without lifting her head, she speaks. He was always going to betray us. Not an accusation. Not anger, just a truth, as flat and inevitable as marble cracking beneath rain. You want to ask 1,000 things. Where's Aelius? Is he safe? Was he the one who turned? But you don't ask, you just listen. He loved the idea of it all, she says. The cause, the letters, the symbols. But he didn't love Rome. Not really. He loved the version of it that made him a hero. And suddenly you understand. She's not talking about Titus. She's talking about Aelius. You don't want it to be true. But maybe that's the final betrayal. Not the knives in the night or the messages uncovered. Maybe the real treachery is simpler. Being left behind. You remember the old oath, by blood, not by throne. You wonder if Aelius broke it. Or if he simply couldn't keep it. Maybe he's dead. Maybe he fled. Maybe he chose survival over victory, over her. You try to speak, but she raises a hand. Don't, she says. You don't need to. She stands then, slowly, painfully, and for the first time, she looks like someone who's finished fighting. Not defeated, but done, like a storm finally spent. She walks toward the sarcophagus, places one hand on the cold stone. They'll turn me into a warning, she says, or a myth, or both. She turns to you, eyes still bright even in the dark. Make sure they get it right. And then she nods once, dismisses you, like a queen, like a sister of emperors, like someone who knows her story is no longer hers alone. You leave before the guards return, and you carry her words with you, because now the rebellion is broken, but the legend has just begun. By dawn the city smells like iron and citrus, blood in the gutters and oranges rotting beneath carts left overturned from the chaos of the night. You wake to horns, not the ceremonial ones played during processions, but the raw, short blasts of soldiers summoning at each other, like wolves howling in formation. You step outside your chamber expecting silence, and instead find Rome alive with the kind of noise that means someone important is either already dead or about to be. You hear the news before breakfast. Commodus has ordered a purge inside the palace. Not of senators, not of governors, but of staff, of servants like you, because one of them, someone in a tunic no different than yours, someone who swept floors and carried wine jugs, got too close. Someone delivered the wrong message or said too much. Or maybe simply stood near Lucilla for too long. It doesn't matter now. Guilt by proximity is enough. You pretend not to notice the new soldiers at the gates. You walk with your eyes down, hands folded, steps careful. You say nothing. You know how this game works. If they notice your fear, they ask questions. If you lie, they smile. Then they never see you again. But as the morning creeps forward, so do the rumours. Lucilla has not been executed. Not yet. Some say she's been moved to the Emperor's private quarters. Others say she's being marched through the tunnels beneath the palace, chained and barefoot, destined for exile again. One claim, whispered by a girl whose father polishes armour for the Praetorians, is that she stood before Commodus and laughed when he asked her to beg. You believe that one, because Rome is still alive with her. You hear her words scratched into stone on the stairwell. A throne is just a chair without the people. You see a child wearing a bracelet that reads, Libertas per sanguinem, freedom through blood. You pass a bakery where a loaf is carved with a crescent moon, her symbol, instead of the Emperor's seal. Commodus notices too, and he's unravelling. Here's your historical fact for tonight. Near the end of his reign, Commodus became obsessed with symbols. He declared himself the reincarnation of Hercules, fought in the arena dressed as a lion slayer, renamed Rome Colonia Commodiana, and tried to rename the months after his own titles. His grip on reality wavered even as his grip on power grew more violent. Fringe fact, one record suggests that Commodus attempted to rewrite family statues, literally. He had the names of his relatives re-chiseled beneath their likenesses, adjusting their legacies to better fit the image he wanted. Lucilla's statue, they say, was quietly moved into storage. But that same night, someone placed a fresh laurel wreath on its head. And the debate? Did Commodus truly fear Lucilla? Or did he need her? Was he keeping her alive because executing her would turn her into something unkillable, a martyr, a myth? Some argue that Lucilla's continued presence was a kind of cage for the Emperor himself. He couldn't end her without ending the illusion that he ruled unchallenged. But things are changing now. The purge isn't neat. Commodus's paranoia moves faster than his plans. Entire corridors are sealed off. The Senate is frozen. Rumours of other rebellions swirl from the provinces. And still, Lucilla remains alive, silent, unreachable, preserved, like a storm behind glass. Then comes the march. Not hers, yours, all of you, the servants, the clerks, the unnamed, marched into the atrium of the palace without explanation. Hundreds, shoulder to shoulder, packed between marble columns where pigeons roost and whisper secrets to the gods. A figure steps forward, one of the Emperor's men. You don't know his name, but you've seen his eyes. Cold, black, predator's eyes. He speaks with a smile that doesn't match his voice. You have served Rome, but now Rome has questions. There's no list, no names, just a gesture toward the right side of the atrium, where a series of stools have been placed, spaced a body length apart. Interrogations, you watch, waiting your turn as one by one servants sit, speak, sweat, and are either dismissed or not. When your name is called, your legs go numb. You sit. They ask about Lucilla. How often did you see her? Did you deliver her letters? Did she ever speak of the Emperor? Did she ever use the phrase New Rome? You lie. Not because you're brave, because you're smart, because you've learnt that in Rome the truth is a currency no one ever spends without bleeding for it. They let you go, for now. You walk back to your quarters with your heart beating in your throat. You half expect someone to follow, to drag you back, to finish what the questions began, but no one does. Instead, a boy slips into your path, young, filthy, laughing like it's a game. He presses a coin into your hand and disappears before you can stop him. The coin is warm from his palm, you turn it over, one side, a blank disc, the other, scratched with the word stand. You stare at it for a long time, because you don't want to be part of this anymore, because you already are. That night, the moon rises full. Lucilla is still alive, and somewhere someone has just made the decision to make her more than that. They're going to make her immortal. You find out she's gone before the birds even start. The air is still purple with night when the word starts to move, not in serpent shouts, not in a parade of soldiers, but in a string of quickened footsteps and pale faces. The guards are whispering, the stewards have vanished, and the kitchen fires go unlit for the first time in memory. Rome has a way of holding its breath when something sacred breaks, and this morning you feel that hollow pause press against your skin. Lucilla has escaped, or she's been rescued, or, as some claim, she vanished. No one knows which version is true and no one agrees on how. Some say she slipped through the catacombs past old bones and empty urns. Others swear she was smuggled out in a coffin alive, breathing beneath silk wrappings, carried like a relic by loyal hands. A few even insist she changed places with another prisoner, that a loyal maid cut her own hair and gave her life to make the switch. The facts don't matter anymore. Not in the way you'd expect. What matters is that she's not in the palace, and Commodus is furious. Not performatively, not theatrically, not like the old tantrums with broken goblets and slapped slaves. This time the Emperor's rage is quiet, heavy, personal. He doesn't scream, he doesn't call for public punishment, he just gives a single order: bring her back dead. Here's your historical fact. Lucilla's real exile didn't last long. Despite her sentence, she was executed under secret orders. Whether she ever tried to escape remains debated. But there's no solid evidence she was killed in Rome, only that she disappeared, a phrase Roman historians used often when they couldn't or wouldn't record the truth. Fringe fact: one ancient manuscript, half-burned and unsigned, contains a line scratched in the margins beside a list of rebel names. The lion cannot devour the moon, she becomes a shadow to Ko, and the stars follow. No scholar knows who wrote it, but they all know who it's about. The debate, of course, is chaos now. Can she escape? Was she smuggled out by surviving allies? Did Aelius return in secret to help her flee? Or, more hauntingly, did she let herself be caught in order to disappear? Some even suggest she arranged her own death, so her legend could live louder than her life ever could. The city doesn't wait for answers. Within hours, the stories begin. They come from market stalls and taverns, from temple steps and hidden corners where coins are passed and songs are sung. She flew across the rooftops. She left by boat, veiled in white. She walks among us now, wearing a mask of olive leaves and calling herself only the sister. You walk through the forum that morning, not because you have a reason, but because you need to feel the pulse of the place, and it's throbbing. Someone's carved her name into the side of the Senate wall, just Lucilla. Nothing else. Not even a message, as if the name alone is enough to tilt the empire. You pass an old woman selling garlands of myrtle and rosemary, traditionally used for weddings and funerals. When you ask her what they're for, she says, whichever she chooses next. There's music now, soft, sad ballads played on street corners. One song tells of a woman who built a new Rome inside her chest and offered it to the people, heart first. Another swears she walks the countryside, swordless but still winning battles. You know it's all myth, all dust and dream and desperate hope. And yet, you receive another message that night. This one doesn't arrive wrapped in ribbon or stuffed in your bedding. It's whispered by a man you've never seen, passed like a prayer beside a broken statue of Mercury. He says, she's gone, but the plan isn't. And then he vanishes into the crowd. That's when it dawns on you. Lucilla may be missing, presumed dead or halfway across the empire, but the thing she started, it's still here. The fire she lit didn't go out when she slipped out of the palace. It jumped. You see it in the way the people behave. No one kneels to the emperor's likeness during the afternoon parade. A child runs beneath a statue of Hercules and leaves a feather tied around its foot, a quiet mockery. A pair of guards lower their torches when passing a household shrine lit in her honour. One of them mutters, "Let her judge us." You visit the catacombs that night, driven by curiosity and maybe something more. A need. A tug in your chest you can't name. Inside there's no body, only silence. And symbols scratched into the stone. A moon, a serpent eating its tail, and beneath it, a single word etched in shaky Latin, endure. You sit there for a long time, the torchlight flickering across ancient bones and colder truth. She's gone, but the silence she left behind hums with power. Then you hear it. A footstep. Not behind you, in front of you. Somewhere deeper in the tunnel. You stand, wait. Nothing else follows. Maybe it was real. Maybe it was your mind playing tricks. Maybe it was a ghost. Or maybe it was someone following the same trail of symbols. Maybe Lucilla left a map. Not to escape, but to spread. A seed, a path, a promise. When you leave the catacombs, Rome is darker. The streets less lit, the shadows thicker, the torches fewer. Commodus is pulling back, retreating into his fortress of paranoia. He's not celebrating her disappearance, he's avulsed of it. Because the worst thing Lucilla could have done wasn't fight him, it was leave. Leave and let the people turn her into something he can't stab or silence. She was once a woman with plans and letters and lovers. Now, she's an idea, and ideas are harder to kill. It's raining by the time the legions arrive. Not the dramatic thunderstorm kind, just that slow Roman drizzle that turns marble to mirrors and makes every step sound like a whisper. The cobblestones glisten. The city's nerves do too. No one speaks, no one cheers, no one's quite sure whether they should be hiding or hailing whoever's coming through the gates. Because these aren't imperial troops. They aren't wearing the polished armour of the Praetorian Guard or the signature blue tunics of Commodus's personal forces. They march without trumpets, without banners. Their armour is dusty, their boots soaked with travel. But they move like they've seen war. Like they're ready to remind the capital what real soldiers look like. And their general, well, that's the part that makes the whole city tense up like a fist. Aelius, yes, that Aelius. He rides at the front, calm, expressionless, eyes locked ahead like he's already decided what the next 3 days will look like. He doesn't raise a fist, doesn't give a speech. He just rides straight through the western gate, flanked by officers who don't blink and standard bearers who don't lower their poles. There are only 2 questions in every Roman's mind. Did Commodus invite him back? Or did Aelius come anyway? You don't get an answer, not at first, because Commodus says nothing. No declaration, no welcome, no condemnation. It's as if the emperor has lost the words. Or worse, he's waiting to see who the city cheers for. It's not him. The people don't applaud, but they don't turn away either. They watch, wide-eyed, silent. One child tries to hand Aelius a fig. He takes it. That's the loudest moment of the day. You, of course, are there. You've positioned yourself near the gates like a loyal servant of nothing in particular, watching everything from behind a stack of amphorae. And when you see him, Aelius, alive, real here, your breath freezes in your chest. He's older than you remember. Not in years, but in weight. Like he's carrying more than his armour. You want to ask him where he's been, how he escaped, whether he was the one who abandoned Lucilla or the one who tried to save her. But you already know. You see it in his eyes. He came back for her, or for what she left behind. Here's your historical fact. Roman generals returning to the city without express permission from the emperor were technically committing treason. It was considered a direct threat to imperial authority, but exceptions were made, usually when the returning general had more popular support than the man on the throne. Fringe fact, in one dusty fragment of a lost historian's scroll it said that a returning general once carried a broken crown, tucked in his saddle. A piece of imperial gold bent around a laurel sprig. It's never identified, but some think it was Aelius, symbolically delivering a ruined monarchy back to the people. The scholarly debate is vicious. Did Aelius return with an army to take power or to restore order? Some claim he was always the mastermind, biding his time until Lucilla cleared the path. Others believe he was called back by remaining loyalists, desperate to stabilise the capital. A third theory suggests he never left at all, that he's been hiding nearby, gathering forces while Rome devoured itself. You don't know what version to believe, but what happens next tells you everything. Because Aelius doesn't go to the Senate, he doesn't march to the palace, he rides to the Forum and dismounts. No guards, no escorts, just him and a voice that somehow cuts through the rain and the crowd and the weight of every whisper in the city. I do not come to be emperor. People gasp. Pause, but he doesn't wait. I come for justice, for order, for the name of one who gave everything for a Rome that no longer fears its reflection. He doesn't say her name. He doesn't have to. The Forum erupts, not into cheers, but into movement. People walk forward, drop coins, kneel, not to him, to the empty plinth once meant for Commodus's next statue. Someone places a candle there, then another, and soon it becomes an altar of sorts, dedicated not to a man or a god, but to the absence left behind. You know what this means. Rome has made its choice, not loudly, not officially, but unmistakably. The emperor's palace remains silent, for now. But the silence feels different now, fragile, the kind of quiet that comes before an avalanche, when the snow hasn't fallen but has already decided it's going to. Aelius disappears into the city that evening. No public escort, no official residence claimed. He vanishes like smoke, but everyone knows he's here. And everyone feels the axis of power begin to tilt. You go to the catacombs that night. You're not alone. There are others, servants, merchants, scribes, all quietly walking the same path beneath the city. No one speaks, but someone lights the way with a candle carved with a crescent moon. Someone else lays a strip of cloth with Lucilla's handwriting at the base of an old altar. "I will not wear the crown without your hand in mine." You stay for a long time, not because you expect her to return, but because something else already has. A mood, a message, a movement. The rebellion isn't over, it's reassembling. You expect the Emperor to speak. You expect fireworks, proclamations, perhaps even a public execution to reclaim the spotlight. Something grand, something brutal, something undeniably Roman. Instead, you get silence. Again, the kind of silence that isn't absence, it's calculation. Commodus does not confront Aelius. He doesn't meet him in the Senate or send the praetorians, or even deign to curse his name in the baths. He retreats, pulls tighter into the folds of his palace, issuing orders only through intermediaries, scribes too nervous to make eye contact. One servant swears the Emperor hasn't left his quarters in 3 days. Another claims he's been sleeping in his armour. The city watches, it doesn't cheer, it doesn't revolt, it waits. That, you realise, is even worse. Because Rome is no longer loyal to any man, not to the Emperor, not to the general, not to ghosts or gods. It's loyal only to an idea now. A spark lit by a woman who may no longer even be breathing. Lucilla. She's become more than memory. She's presence. You feel her in the way people glance toward the forum as they pass, in the quiet recitations of her words etched into the bases of statues. Someone leaves figs and laurel at the old temple steps, offerings not for a god, but for a woman who defied one. You don't know where Aelius is. No one does. Which is then possible. He's the most famous man in the city right now, yet somehow he's everywhere and nowhere. The only thing that surfaces are sightings, alleged, conflicting, foggy. He was seen at a soldier's funeral laying a hand on the mother's shoulder. He was spotted climbing the Capitoline Hill alone at midnight. He visited Lucilla's former villa, walked through the gardens, and left without speaking. Maybe none of it is true, or maybe all of it is. Here's your historical fact: the final years of Commodus's reign were riddled with rumours of conspiracy and disobedience. Several generals were accused of plotting his assassination. None were formally charged, most simply vanished. Records from this period are sparse, overwritten, or destroyed. What we know comes largely from reconstructed sources written decades later, already softened by myth. Fringe fact: a coin unearthed in the ruins of a Roman villa near Ostia bears the image of a helmeted figure, faceless, standing between a sword and a scroll, no emperor's name, no identifying marks, just the word voluntas, will. It's believed to be a rogue minting, an unauthorized currency passed among rebels. The debate swirls on. Was Aelius ever truly seeking power? Or did he come only to finish what Lucilla started? Did he disappear because he failed, or because he succeeded and realised there was nothing left to claim? You think back to that day in the forum, to the fig in the child's hand, to the silence that followed his speech, and you wonder, is it possible for someone to win and still lose? To be present but no longer welcome? Because Rome doesn't love heroes, not really. Rome loves martyrs, symbols, stories it can recite by firelight and twist into meaning. Lucilla gave them that. Aelius? He might still be flesh, but he's already fading into fable. You begin to notice a new pattern. People no longer speak of overthrowing the emperor. They speak of replacing him, and not with Aelius. With her, Lucilla, even if she's gone. They ask, what would she have done? They quote her like scripture, inventing half of it along the way. One woman in the market claims Lucilla once said, "Power without empathy is theft." Another swears she wrote the line, "An empire that fears its daughters is already dust." There's no proof. There doesn't need to be. Because Lucilla no longer belongs to history. She belongs to legend. And Commodus, for all his might, can't kill a legend, but he tries. That's when the trials begin. 3 senators accused of reciting rebel letters, 2 generals summoned for loyalty re-examinations. A boy barely old enough to hold a scroll dragged into questioning because he wore a crescent pin on his cloak. One by one they're silenced. Some are exiled, others executed. Many just disappear, their names scraped from the records with terrifying efficiency. You expect this to scare the people back into obedience. It doesn't. Instead, something stranger happens. More people begin wearing the pins. More coins show up with blank faces. More scribes begin copying her words onto scrolls, passing them like sacred texts beneath temple floors and tavern benches. You find one yourself slipped between loaves of bread in the palace kitchen. A single line, he ruled in fear, she led in memory. You can't tell if it's real, but you believe it. Then comes the night that shifts the world again. A small gathering in a candlelit alley behind the Temple of Saturn. 15 people, some known, most not. Farmers, traders, a few servants, one man with a limp and a tattoo of a serpent along his neck. They speak not of revenge, not of war, but of succession. A new kind of Rome, not one ruled by birthright, or by a man crowned in bronze and blood, but by those who remember what Lucilla stood for: measured strength, purpose, grace, and most dangerously an empire led by more than just men. You don't speak at the meeting, but when the man with the serpent tattoo asks for those who still carry her words to step forward, you do. You pull the folded parchment from your tunic, the one with the ink barely visible now. No crown without your hand in mine, and you place it on the altar of stones they've built in the dirt. No one says her name. They don't need to. The empire is shifting again, not with swords but with echoes, with promises, with memory. And you've stopped asking if she's alive, because you know now. She is, in every whisper, in every flame, in every frightened heart that dares to hope. Lucilla is still here, and Rome is starting to believe. The next time you hear Aelius's name, it's in a sentence that ends with a gasp. You're in the northern district, Vidornsko, standing in line for grain like everyone else who's trying to act normal, while the empire burns quietly behind the curtain. The woman behind you leans forward, her breath warm and conspiratorial. They found him, or he surrendered, or both. Your neck tightens. You turn your head slightly. She's already looking away. That night, the city learns the full sentence. Aelius was taken into custody by the Praetorian Guard outside the gates of Viminal Hill. No resistance, no fight, no legion at his back. He was alone, unarmed, just standing there, waiting. Commodus, of course, makes no announcement. He lets the rumour do the work for him. But you know it's true. You know by the way the guards shift their posture in the halls, no longer jumpy but smug. You know by the way the senators stop looking over their shoulders and instead begin whispering like men preparing for a coronation. The lion caught the wolf, and now they're dragging him to the cage. No trial, no public appearance, just locked away in one of the lower prison chambers beneath the palace, a place so deep the air tastes like dust and forgotten oaths. You hear one scribe say they've posted 20 guards just to keep him from breathing too loud. Another claims Commodus visits him in the dark just to stare. Doesn't say a word, just looks at him, waiting for Aelius to blink first. You try to see him. You know the tunnels, the back ways. But they've changed everything, closed every secret door, posted guards where no guards ever stood. You catch one flash of his silhouette through a grate in the floor above the cells. He's sitting, head bowed, but he's alive, still. And that changes everything, because the city doesn't know what to feel. Lucilla. Gone, but larger than life. Aelius, returned, and now behind iron. The rebellion, fractured but breathing. And Rome is holding its breath again. Here's your historical fact. Aelius is never mentioned by name in any of Commodus's surviving edicts, but multiple records refer to a general of seditious temperament, being imprisoned shortly before the emperor's death. Some suggest he was never formally charged, just detained indefinitely. Fringe fact, a chunk of graffiti discovered in what used to be a bathhouse wall reads, "He waited below the world, but above the worms. It's unsigned, scrawled in charcoal." But someone painted a crescent moon beside it in red. Even then, Lucilla's presence lingered. The scholars argue endlessly. Why did Aelius let himself be taken? Was it surrender? Strategy? Some suggest he lost hope without Lucilla. Others think he meant to become a symbol of injustice, a final chess piece moved where it could be sacrificed loudest. But there's another theory, one less quoted, one whispered mostly by those who don't publish in libraries, that Aelius chose the cell, not as defeat, as a message, because when people vanish in Rome, it's easy for power to claim they never existed. But when a body remains, breathing, trapped, visible, then the people can see the injustice, they can build a fire beneath it. You hear it in the streets. He's still alive. They haven't broken him. Lucilla waits, but so does he. Someone even claims Aelius scratched a message into his wall, "She will rise where I fall." No one knows if it's real, but that doesn't matter anymore. And here's what really unravels Commodus. He wants Aelius to beg, but Aelius doesn't. He eats the food, drinks the water, sleeps, breathes, but not once does he ask for mercy. You're told by a steward who cleans the cell hallway that Aelius said only one thing since his capture. The Empire knows your crown has rusted. And then nothing else. No grovelling, no apologies, just silence and patience, like he's waiting for something bigger than bars to open. Commodus tries to bury him in deeper quiet. No one is allowed to speak of the prisoner. One scribe is publicly whipped for saying the word Aelius during morning census. But still, the city whispers. And not in fear, in awe. You see it in the streets again. Not crowds, just eyes, hopeful, restless eyes. A new song starts, low and hummed. He sits for us, while she walks the wind. A child draws a chalk figure on the palace gate, a stick man with chains on his wrists but wings on his back. The emperor orders it scrubbed. It reappears the next day, bigger. You return to the catacombs. Of course you do. You've begun visiting more often now. It's not just a hiding place anymore. It's a map, a language, a rhythm. There are new additions, offerings left at the altars, figs, iron nails bent into crescent shapes, scraps of poetry written on clay shards. One message reads, "He holds the door, she is the door." You don't understand all of it, not yet, but the sense of motion is everywhere. The rebellion isn't loud. And it's growing like roots under stone. You realise something then. Lucilla may be gone, Aelius may be caged. But Rome doesn't need a leader right now. It needs a reason. And the people, they've chosen one. Not revenge, not power, not blood, memory. That's what keeps the whispers alive. That's what makes the Empire shake. Because as long as Aelius breathes in his cell, Lucilla's flame stays lit in the city. And you start to believe what the scribes never dared to write. That sometimes the Empire doesn't fall because of war or famine or fire. Sometimes it falls because someone refuses to kneel. Even when they're already on the floor. The day starts with a hush, not silence exactly. Rome is never silent, not with its thousands of feet shuffling over marble, its carts creaking through the alleys, its dogs barking and fountains trickling and lovers arguing beneath windows. But today something's missing. It takes you a moment to recognize it. The drums. The Emperor's drums, which usually beat from the palace each morning, announcing order, declaring rituals, commanding attention. They are gone, not muffled, not late, gone. It spreads fast. People stop mid-step, heads tilting toward the capital like they have just noticed a tremor under their feet. You watch an entire merchant stall pack up in silence, the vendor too distracted to count coins. A boy selling roasted nuts starts to cry and doesn't know why. The pigeons are still perched, but even they don't move. And then comes the news, not shouted, whispered, passed mouth to mouth like a shared drink in a drought. Commodus is dead. You blink, swallow, wait. You've heard these rumours before. He's vanished, he's been poisoned, he's turned into a god and floated away. But this one feels different. This one sticks. Because there's no refutation, no corrections, no guards pushing crowds back, no declaration of mourning or succession. Just a blank space where the Empire's voice used to be. Here's your historical fact. The death of Emperor Commodus occurred on December 31st, 192 CE. Officially, he was strangled in his bath by a wrestler named Narcissus, under orders from high-ranking officials who feared his instability would destroy the empire. The plot involved his chamberlain and several senators, and possibly his mistress. Fringe fact. Some claim Commodus's death was foretold by a cracked statue of Mars that collapsed days earlier, its face shattering just as the emperor began plans to rename Rome after himself yet again. A soldier wrote in a surviving letter, "The gods grow tired of mirrors," and the debate? Was Lucilla behind it all along, her plans echoing long after her disappearance? Was Aelius part of it, pulling strings from his cell like a shadow general? Or was it simply the inevitable, a paranoid tyrant choking on his own decadence, finally brought down by the very hands that once dressed him in armour? You don't know, no one does. But the palace doors are open. Open, not shattered, not guarded, just standing there wide and still and waiting like a mouth ready to speak. You're not the first to walk through them. People gather cautiously in the atrium, feet slipping on polished stone slick with anticipation. The halls are empty, torches unlit. Statues cast strange, silent glances toward each other. You pass rooms you've only glimpsed before. Commodus's private banquet chamber, his gold-laced bath, his weapon hall where he kept the trophies of gladiators he slaughtered in stage games. Everything untouched. Except one thing. The throne. It's not just unoccupied, it's scorched, singed along the armrests, as if someone tried to burn it from beneath and stopped halfway. Draped over the top is a single piece of cloth. A crescent moon embroidered in silver thread. You laugh, quietly, in disbelief. Someone knew this moment was coming, and someone wanted to mark it. The crowd grows behind you. More faces, more eyes. No shouting, just breath. The only sound in the room is footsteps approaching from behind the colonnade. And then, her, Lucilla, alive, not veiled, not in chains, not hidden in the shadows. She steps into the light like a final act of defiance so perfectly timed it's poetic. The room inhales as one. You feel it in your throat, your knees, your spine. She's thinner, but not weak. Her hair is streaked with grey now, but pulled back in braids like armour. She wears no crown, no purple robes, just a simple white tunic with a pin over her heart shaped like the same crescent that draped the throne. She doesn't walk to the throne, she walks past it, stands in the centre of the room and looks at every single person watching and says, "I didn't kill him." No one speaks. I didn't need to. And then she does something no emperor has ever done. She sits on the floor, cross-legged, like a teacher, like a priestess, like someone who knows they don't need a throne to command a room. Rome must decide what Rome becomes, she says, not through fear, not through blood, but through memory. It's not a speech. Not really. It's a kind of unburdening. She talks of the early years, of her father, Marcus Aurelius, of what Rome was and what it could have been. She doesn't cry, she doesn't raise her voice, she just speaks, and somehow that's louder than any army. You feel yourself kneeling. Not because she asked, because it feels wrong to stand. Others kneel too, one by one, not in submission, but in recognition, in memory, in thanks. Here's the thing, Lucilla doesn't declare herself empress, she doesn't crown herself, and she doesn't issue orders, she doesn't even stay. By evening, she's gone again, left as quietly as she arrived. Some say she returned to the countryside. Some say she joined a temple, became a mystic, took a vow of silence. Some say she died that night, her last act to restore a city that had forgotten itself. But those are just stories. What you do know is this: the palace was never sealed again. The throne was melted down, recast into coins stamped with an image of a woman's hand holding a scroll. And Aelius? His cell was found empty the next morning. No signs of struggle. Just a crescent painted on the back wall in ash. People say he left quietly, went east, vanished like Fpo. Others say he and Lucilla rode out together, one last time into the dark, letting Rome decide its own fate. You don't know what's true, but you know what you believe, and you know the city that remains after them is not the same. Rome survived, but it was never whole again, not in the way it was before. And maybe that's a mercy, because now Rome remained to... And sometimes that's more powerful than rule. You walk the same streets, but they don't feel like yours anymore. Not because you've changed, though you have. Not because the palace gates are open, though they are. But because the air tastes different. Lighter, almost. Like Rome has been holding its breath for years and has finally let it out in one long, slow exhale. And yet no one says we've won. There's no parade, no official decree, no banners declaring Lucilla's face the new face of Rome. No coins minted in Aelius's honour. The marble statues still bear Commodus's name in cracked letters, though someone has gently carved an X through most of them. The Senate still meets, but more often in whispered gatherings than grand forums. The temple bells ring again, but they sound tentative, like they're unsure whether they've been forgiven or simply forgotten. This is what peace looks like in Rome, not triumph, recovery. No one knows what happened to Lucilla after that final appearance in the palace. Some say she fled to the hills into a life of solitude and stillness. Others whisper that she walks the streets disguised as a healer, bandaging wounds and reading fortunes beneath a market tent. One theory suggests she took a vow of silence and lives in a temple beyond the city walls, praying not for Rome, but for herself. And Aelius, he's even more elusive, the general who could have ruled but didn't. No official account records his death. No tomb bears his name. Occasionally someone claims to have seen him, on a fishing boat in the harbour, or riding through the countryside alone, or standing silently at Lucilla's empty grave on the anniversary of her exile. Maybe none of it is true. Or maybe all of it is, because Rome doesn't deal in facts anymore. Not when it comes to them, it deals in myth, and the myth, as always, is more powerful. You think about the way it all began, how the whispers started behind fans and through locked doors, how a single gaze across a banquet table led to treason, rebellion, and the slow undervilling of an empire. You remember the letters, the love, the quiet meetings in shadowed corridors, the moon scratched onto stone, the blood in the bathhouse, the flame that never fully went out. And you remember how close it all came to collapse. You were there, you saw it. Here's your final historical fact. Rome survived, it always did. But cracks formed in the foundation during those years, political, spiritual, moral. The years following Commodus' death were marked by the short reigns, assassinations, and chaos. Historians now call it the beginning of the empire's long decline. Fringe fact: a scroll recovered centuries later, hidden in the base of a fountain near the Forum, bore a series of names followed by symbols: suns, stars, and moons. Among them, the sun. Lucilla appeared next to a simple flame. Some say it was a secret list of founders for a forgotten sect that worshipped not gods but the power of memory and moral leadership. And the final debate? Did Lucilla and Aelius change the course of the empire, or simply delay the inevitable? Some scholars argue that the story is just that, a story. That too much of it depends on hearsay, symbolism, and emotion. Others say it doesn't matter, that what they meant became more important than what they did. Because every empire falls, but not every empire leaves behind a love story that nearly unravelled the world. You walk past the Forum one morning and find a young girl standing at the edge of the ruins, holding a loaf of bread pressed with a crescent moon. She sees you watching and holds it up like an offering. "Do you know what this means?" she asks. You nod. "Yes," you say. "It means someone remembered." She smiles and runs off. You think of the letters, of the scroll tucked beneath your mattress, of the nights spent watching shadows flicker against marble walls, hoping not for salvation but for something true. And you think of her, Lucilla, not the would-be empress, not the lover, not the rebel, but the memory, the quiet resistance, the one who dared to believe Rome didn't have to be ruled by cruelty and crowned blood, the one who showed what love could become when sharpened into purpose. So now, when people ask what happened to the empire, you don't talk about Commodus, you don't talk about the Senate, the assassins, the generals, or the gods. You tell them about her, and you tell them about you, because you were there. And the story, like the city, still stands. And now, as the candles burn low and the sounds of the street soften into nighttime murmurs, you settle into the quiet that follows a story. Not the end, no, never truly the end, but that slow descent into hush, where the echoes fade and the meaning lingers. You close your eyes and remember her face. Not the statuesque version, not the imperial portrait painted in gold leaf, but the real one. The tired, brilliant, fiercely human face of Lucilla. A woman born into power, yes, but who dared to wield it not with force but with intent. She didn't want a throne, she wanted a better Rome. And that might be the most dangerous thing anyone can want. Aelius still drifts through your mind too, his silence, his scars, the weight he carried for a cause that may never have truly been his, to hold alone. Maybe he loved her, maybe he betrayed her, maybe both. History, as you now understand, is rarely a clean scroll. It's a palimpsest, layered, overwritten, smudged by every hand that tries to claim it. But you were there. You saw the moment it all could have broken, and you saw what endured instead. Not empires, not statues, not crowns, but memory. Quiet, persistent memory. So, as you turn off your light and let your body relax into whatever shape sleep takes tonight, let that be the final thought. That even in a world of marble and war, it's the soft things, letters, promises, whispers, that survive the longest. Maybe you carry a story too. Maybe you're part of one right now. Either way, thank you for staying through the end. Dream gently, sleep fully, and never forget what a single love can do to an empire.